And now it's time for Mob Talk Radio with your host, Jeff Canarsie. School's in, bitches.
And welcome to Mob Talk Radio. I am your host, Jeff Canarsie, and we've got a big one today. We are going to do a massive Q&A. We are going to talk about some news and notes right here and now. We're going to cover the usual scumbag of the week. We're going to cover a special thing here in a few minutes, which we like to call confronting the Stalkers. You'll know what that is as soon as it begins. And then we're going to cover John Difronzo. So we've got a lot going on this week and a lot to get to. And so I wanted to get to the first sort of tidbit, which is the news. Obviously, unless you've been living under a rock, everybody knows about the hit that took place. I believe it was a week ago today. In the Bronx, Francisco Rizzuto, 51, was the alleged leader of the Pagans motorcycle group. Two armed assailants with silencer-equipped pistols pretty much took care of business in broad daylight. And according to the feds, they think that it's a swift retaliation from the Hells Angels, whose clubhouse back last January was shot up half a dozen times. Nobody was arrested as a result of that. Now, a lot of the federal law enforcement's point of view when it comes to this, and the reason why they're blaming the Hells Angels, is likely has more to do with territory than anything. The Hells Angels were a couple of blocks. Their headquarters from the late 1960s was in Manhattan. They sold their club. They moved out of the city. And that was Allerton. And typically that is pagan territory. Now, I'm not going to tell you I know a lot about biker gangs. I really don't. I'll be honest with you. But there's a couple of things I know about the streets. And there's a couple of things with this hit that I've seen people saying that I just don't buy. First of all, historically, if you look at the Hells Angels, they don't fuck around. They're not the type of group that's going to sit back and tolerate any bullshit. It's been that way since their inception, and I don't think that's ever going to fucking change. So I don't think it's too much of a stretch to admit that maybe the Hells Angels, and the Pagans are going to bump heads over turf and territory. That doesn't surprise me. However, if you look at the hit, and there was a lot of things that have been released, obviously nobody has been arrested, but if we take the theory that the feds and the stateies are alleging here, is that the Hells Angels moved into what has typically been controlled by the Pagans, into a new clubhouse, and then all of a sudden it gets shot up. It's not rocket science to try to figure that out. It's not rocket science to understand why there would be some retaliation. However, looking at this CCTV of the actual hit taking place, which you can see online, it really didn't strike me. A lot of people have said, oh, look, he's taking a military pose. He's trained. And it's, look, the reality is a couple of things. It did not look like a professional hit to me. I mean, it's professional to the extent where they've got silenced equipped pistols and they shot and killed the fucking guy. But it's not rocket science to actually kill a fucking guy when two people are firing at the fucker. You know what I mean? But one of the things you will notice if you do check out that CCTV footage of this hit is that the driver gets out and pretty much takes a firing stance, and the passenger gets out and begins to run pretty much north, and then he's going to bank a right turn around the block to start firing. But one thing I did notice was that the driver, who took a shooter's stance, immediately dropped his pistol to his side as his co-conspirator sort of walked into his line of sight. So obviously the driver is a guy that has shot a weapon before. Does that make him ex-military? No. Does that make him ex-law enforcement? No, not at all. He simply just put his weapon down so he didn't kill his fucking partner. Short of that, you see them run back, get in the car, and they take off down the street, about sideswiping another fucking car that was at the intersection. And so you could tell they were nervous and stuff like that. So I don't think, and I agree with my buddy in Detroit, that I don't think that this was a a hit that was designed, pre-planned for a whole lot of time. And I also don't think while the law enforcement's going to blame the Hells Angels, anything they can do to blame them, they're going to do. I just don't buy it was them. Now, there may be stuff that comes out and proves that I'm absolutely wrong. I just don't buy it. To me, in my personal opinion, not that I know anything about bikers, but the way the streets operate, I don't think the Hells Angels necessarily are going to carry that out broad daylight in a well-populated area. This smells to me like an inside job. And what I mean by that is it sort of appears to me to be a job that somebody within the Pagans carried out to remove Rizzuto, who was allegedly the head of the Pagans. To me, it reeks more of that. Here's another little clue. I doubt very seriously. Look at the shoes on the shooters. I doubt very seriously a Hells Angel is going to wear white Nike Air Force Ones. Everything I believe in goes against that. Those are not typically shoes that a Hells Angel guy is going to wear. Now, the passengers wear work boots. That makes a little more sense. And I know some of you are going to say, this guy wore Air Force Ones to throw off the police. I really don't think so. And why would you choose to wear fucking white? I don't get it. So at the end of the day, I think this is an inside job by the Pagans. And of course, why not? They had already known that the Hells Angels clubhouse got shot up. So, law enforcement's going to go with that excuse. But I just don't buy it. I don't buy it. This reeks of inside job to me. But who knows? Maybe we'll find out. But that was pretty big news because it just the sheer audacity of broad daylight. Didn't give a fuck. And like I said, anybody who watches the video can critique it. They can sit down and analyze frame by frame whether this guy took a fucking stance or whatever the case may be. But the reality is that they wanted Rizzuto dead. And I don't think that they were fucking around. And that speaks more volumes to me than anything. So he wasn't well liked by somebody. It doesn't matter whether it was the fucking Hells Angels or it doesn't matter if it was the Pagans. They wanted him dead. But I still stand by what I mean as far as this being an inside job. So the second thing that we have, we're going to talk about a former Lucchese guy. As we know, everybody's getting released from prison with this COVID ID bullshit. Some guys get out, some guys don't. And it was, I think, a statement I made fucking last week that I didn't think anybody with serious murder charges was going to get out. I just thought that violent offenses would probably disqualify somebody. But the reality is that sometimes I even get shocked. Mikey Spinelli was recently released. He's a longtime Lucchese family member. And here's the thing. He was released from prison due to COVID-19. Obviously, he had some former health problems. But he was serving a 30-year sentence for attempted murder, and that goes back to 1992. Spinelli was the Lucchese a maid guy, and he was directed by the Lucchese hierarchy to hit a woman by the name of Patricia Capizalo. She was the mother of three, but she's also the sister of Pete Chiodo, who obviously had turned to the dark side of the force, joining Team Federal Agent, became a rat, and apparently Vica Musso did not want Pete Chiodo to talk, and so he ordered the hit on Chiodo's sister. The attempt on his sister pretty much goes against everything the mob stands for. You just don't kill women, you don't kill children, and usually you don't kill the sisters of fucking federal informants, but sometimes things happen. At least that's what the federal government has alleged. So Spinelli basically would tail her for a couple weeks, and eventually he catches up to her and he lights her up. He ends up shooting her 3 times. She gets hit in the neck, the ear, and the back. She'd actually survived the hit and would go on to testify against Spinelli. Spinelli, who is 66, was not due to get out of prison until 2029. And so the mere fact that he was convicted of attempted murder and got 30-year sentence, and the fact that he wasn't due out till another 9 or 10 years from now, it's a little interesting to me. Through his attorney, Spinelli has said that, life has been hard for him on the inside. He's totally changed who he is. And he would like to get out and become a fucking yoga instructor. A yoga instructor. Yep, you can't make this shit up. So Spinelli has been released 9.5 years early. And I'm not sure how accurate the 9 years early is, because I think, federal time, you still got to do 85% of your time. So he may have been due out a little bit earlier than 2029. But that goes against exactly what I thought would be the parameters for letting these guys out. Frankie Locascio being one of them with murder charges. I think the fact that Spinelli tried to kill a woman is more indicative of a guy that should not get out versus Frank Locascio, who is convicted guilty of a murder that John Gotti ordered. So, who knows? At this point, I don't understand what the fuck is going on. I know the feds probably are not happy about this, but another one sort of gets out. Okay, so, excuse me. So the next thing that I want to talk about is sort of this new platform we're going to go with. A lot of people have been messaging me and asking me when the new format of the show is going to begin, when we're going to have a new website, when we're going to have all of this stuff and that. So today I am going to tell you a couple of things. So I've sat back and I've looked at a lot of different platforms, and we finally found one that worked, something that is going to be able to be downloaded to your phone, something that is going to categorize every single show from A to B, and we're also going to transfer a lot of the old shows onto that platform as well. But one of the things I am doing is I'm holding off till July. The reason being is with COVID-19 and everything that's going on, I'm not exactly trying to fucking rob Peter to pay Paul at this point. I'm not in a rush to get it done. As everybody knows, I just recently received a couple of grand worth of podcast stuff. That's why, if you notice, the sound is a little bit different. That's where it's coming from. But as far as the website goes, the blog that we work off of is going to be free. It's always going to be the same place. We'll probably make that a www site just to make it easier. But as far as the podcast stuff, what we are going to do is live shows. We can broadcast on this platform that we're going to use, live shows. We can also do it on YouTube, which we are planning on doing. And the people that join the podcast site will get a link to live shows on YouTube and links to special events on YouTube, which will take them to a private part of YouTube where they're going to have to essentially type in a password. So what's this really going to be like at the end of the day? What it's going to be is it's going to be something you can download on your phone, like I said earlier, something you can sit on your laptop and listen to, password protected, live shows, normal shows, and we are going to charge for it. I know that we talked on the show a lot about as far as what we were going to charge. Initially, there was some lower prices, some higher prices. And so what we really did was I sent a bunch of people that I'm really close to. And I said, just research this for me. Let me know what the common denominator is, what people are offering for what, because I'm not trying to rob anybody. You know what I mean? I'm trying to make it where I can sort of offset some of my costs and at the same time give you better shows than what we've been capable of. And so what it's going to come down to is this. We are going to charge $5 a month. It's less than what everybody else is charging. And for that, there's going to be giveaways, T-shirts, books, all kinds of mob memorabilia. We're going to do some mob painting giveaways and stuff like that. And basically, you'll be able to go onto this platform and you can do two options. You're going to have two options. The first one is you can pay month to month, which means at the end of the month, if you still want to stick around, you can join back up again. But that is going to be more expensive than just paying for a full 12 months. Anybody that joins for 12 months is only going to pay $5. Anybody that goes month to month is going to pay $5.75. It's still cheaper than everybody else out there. It's not a lot of money. It's $5 a month to listen to me rant, scream, and do whatever. So those that do join are going to get a lot of cool features. Like I said, access to documentaries, which we're still working on, live call-in shows. Pretty much everything that we do now it's just going to be amplified times 10. And I think we're going to do probably, I want to say 4 to 5 shows per month. They will be broadcast for the most part live. That's what we're saying right now. But before we put everything out, obviously, we'll give you the details from A to Z about what everything is. We're still playing with a couple of different features. In fact, we are going to be having a lot of guests come on. We're starting to line all of them up now. But like I said, this stuff takes time. But I'm thinking by July, I want to say by like the 10th of July, the show will be on its own platform. We will not be taking those shows and putting them on YouTube for free. It's just not going to be the way we do things. But as we move further along, some things may change here and there. The price may change a little bit, and it's not going to change as far as being high. It'll change to being a little bit less if we do that. But there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of pre-planning I got to do. So just at bare bones, you know what you're going to get involved in, once we do that. So all that being said, that's pretty much it for the news and notes. But there is something that is coming right now. And I have to preamble this just a little bit. I think, and this was pre-recorded before this show, and I just want everybody to understand one thing. I don't tolerate nonsense from fucking idiots. I don't tolerate stalkers. I don't tolerate jerk-offs. I don't tolerate bitches. I just don't. And I got fed up. And so what you're about to hear is exactly what happened. So this thing right here that I'm going to talk about, this has been pre-recorded before I've even gotten to the new show. And the reason why I'm doing this is because this just happened. So obviously, if you're listening to this now, which will probably be on Monday or late Sunday night, obviously this happened today, which today being the 8th of May at around 4:35 in the afternoon. So for about a year now, it's more than that. It's probably closer to 3 years. I have had the same bullshit stalker, jerk-off, lunatic stalking every one of my Facebook accounts, which I only have one. He, of course, alleges I have 700. I didn't know it was fucking, even fucking remotely possible to have fucking 700. Fucking dunce this piece of shit is. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I wanted to show you the type of shit that I deal with. It's not in any way to make myself look better. This fucking lunatic doesn't know me. He attempted to do an expose on me, which was legally taken down because they were all proven to be lies. He has consistently messaged hundreds. We're not talking 5. We're not talking 10. Hundreds of fucking people who post my show, people who are friends with me. He must have fake accounts because somehow he was getting personal pictures of me, and I don't want to get into all of that. But what he has done is he's really attacked anybody who listens to my show. And then he makes these wild fucking claims that aren't even fucking realistic. Like, it would be one thing if he made up a good lie. I'd have a good chuckle at that shit. I got a good fucking sense of humor. But this guy makes up shit that isn't even in the fucking realm of feasibility. This is the same guy that's attacked my family and attempted to do other things. And the guy's just a fucking lunatic. I would love to get into how he even got involved in this, but I can't legally talk about it. And the reason why I can't is because I had a civil matter that I can't get into. But this guy just took it upon himself to start messaging anybody who posted my show on Facebook, anybody who's friends with me, and just harasses them relentlessly. You do not know how many people, easily 150, 200 people have come to me and said, this guy is saying all kinds of crazy shit. What's wrong with him? And he just didn't do it to me. He actually emailed Chris Casparosa. And, Chris and I talk. We're friends. And he was like, this guy's a fucking, animal. I'm paraphrasing what Chris said, but he's like, yeah, something's wrong with this guy. And so I've ignored it for a long time. I could have fucking filed a lawsuit against some of the crazy shit that he says, but, you don't feed the fucking chimpanzees at the fucking zoo for a reason. There's a reason why Philadelphia, when you go to the Philly Zoo, in the lion cage says, don't feed the fucking lions. I never understood why the fuck they had a McDonald's 25 feet from the fucking lion cage, but you don't feed the fucking nutcases. And one of my favorite lines from Rocky is, take her to the zoo, Rock. I hear retards like the zoo. This is one of those situations. Not only has this guy sent pornography to people in messages, he has sent bestiality videos to people. Now, I don't know where you come from. Porn is one thing. When you send a fucking video of a guy banging an animal, there is something mentally fucking wrong with you. And that's what this guy does. He's a liar. He has no validity. He sure as fuck doesn't know me from Apple or Adam, but he likes to claim it. And so today I did something that is new to me. I decided, fuck this punk, fuck this cocksucker, fuck this motherfucker. I'm going to call him on his bullshit. He wants to talk all of this shit online. He wants to make fake group pages, fake profiles, fake news articles, fake whatever. Guy's a lunatic, right? He wants to do all this, so I'm going to give him the opportunity of a fucking lifetime, and I'm going to call the guy, and I'm going to give him the fucking opportunity to talk shit to me. They never do. I've done this a couple of times. They never do. Either they hear my voice and they fucking hang up, which is what this guy has done twice earlier today, but I got his number, and I called. And what you're about to hear is how fucking much of a lunatic this guy is. I give him every opportunity to say whatever he wants. I'm even nice and I'm even fucking cordial. His name is Jared Ham. All right? And for those that start the Virginia Beach bullshit cycle again, yes, I lived there. I've always said I did. I've never fucking denied that a day in my fucking life. Okay? So I called him. And what you're going to hear is me being nice and him exploding like Jeffrey fucking Dahmer, like he's a tough guy, because he's not. He's not a tough guy. And I don't even really know the fucking guy, but I know he's not a tough guy because I have met the guy a couple of times. But the point is that this is the fucking kind of lunatic that fucking people employ and pay to do hit jobs on people. This guy doesn't know me, doesn't know anything about me. But as you'll see, when I ask him a very poignant fucking question, and that question is, the fuck are you doing this nonsense for? Nobody believes the bullshit you're saying. What are you wasting time for? I don't know. I don't really have anything better to do. That should tell you right there. He had every opportunity to say, oh, well, you're this, or I heard you that, or this, that, and the third. He doesn't say that. And then he goes to a whole fucking space cadet fucking range that I can't fucking believe, laying out threats like he's going to do something, like he's a fucking tough guy. And before I play the phone call, I want this to set the tone. And this. So when you going to stop lying, you prick?
What?
When you going to stop lying and making fake fucking group pages? When you going to stop this nonsense? You're like a stalker.
Never stopping. I'm going to keep going forever and ever.
Yeah, what's your reasoning?
What?
What is your reasoning?
Oh, I don't really have a reason.
You think you're not gonna you think people give a shit? Nobody believes what you're saying.
Man, how many fake profiles do you have?
Well, actually, I only have one Facebook profile. Honest to God, I would tell you if I had multiples.
You got like 700.
Where are you getting that from?
Dude, Chris Dorky? Come on, man.
Who?
Fucking Chris Dorky.
I don't
God
even.
Damn it.
I don't even know who that is.
Fuck, man. I'm gonna fucking beat your ass.
You're a.
What the fuck?
You're a. You're a. You're a stalker. Stalker. Yeah. And so there you have it. The big fucking tough guy. The guy that has everything to say about me all over Facebook and everywhere else. The same guy that attacks 150 people that I call friends because he thinks he knows something and he wants you to believe. He wants you to believe that I'm something I'm not. And you just got to ask yourself, who's he doing it for? And I think it's very apparent he's doing a lot of this for his own ego. And he wants attention. He's a fucking lunatic. Like I've always said on this show, there are certain fucking individuals in this fucking nutty fucking world that have man crushes or something, or they've got like fucking obsession issues. This guy needs mental fucking help. That's all I can say. I don't give a shit about his threats. He's not going to do nothing to me. He's a pussy. Big fucking pussy. All these guys run their fucking mouths on the keyboard. They run their fucking mouths over the phone, but they're not going to do it in real life. And that's my thing. You ever notice these jerk-offs that do this stuff? And it's not just to me. They've done it to Chris Casparosa. They've done it to a lot of people. that I could sit here and they've done it to Ciro DiPaggio. They've done it to a lot of different guys because they don't like them or whatever the fuck. But at the end of the day, they make fake accounts to do it. They can't even do it in their real name. Jared is one of these fucking individuals that I have dozens, hundreds of screenshots of this guy saying this nonsense to anybody who will fucking listen. So if this guy fucking inboxes you, do yourself a favor and just block him. Otherwise, you're going to get like the crazy, ranting, lunatic, inbred bullshit that I got. And all I was doing was calling to give him an opportunity to be a fucking man. To be a fucking man and tell me the shit that he's saying all over the place. But he couldn't do it. He's reduced to screaming over the phone like some jerk-off, inbred hillbilly fuck. And that's the truth. He's a gutless punk. He's a fucking coward. And he's a jerk-off. I could sue the guy. I don't want to do that. Well, what would be the point? But I just wanted to show all of you who listen to my show what I deal with. Because these are fucking nut jobs. It's not just him. He's the worst and the most perverse of the bunch. Because the other ones, they just don't like me because they just don't like me, and I don't give a fuck. But this one watches bestiality and sends fucking bestiality videos to people. You want those to come out, Jarrett? You want all those videos to come out of you sending people videos of a guy fucking a dog? The fuck is wrong with you? You know that's a federal crime, you dumb fuck. I don't get it with these people. So, like I said, I typically don't do this. This is not my thing that I want to do. But at some point, I got to put a stop to it because I don't give a fuck what he says about me. He's a gutless punk and a coward and a bitch. But the fact that he's bothering a lot of you does piss me off. The fact that he's giving people false information, which they're putting out, only makes them look like a bigger sucker because they're believing somebody that doesn't know anything about me. And that's the thing. I have repeatedly offered this scumbag Ham to come on my show and debate me. He won't do it. Of course he won't do it. You could tell by the way he talks on the phone. He can't have a civil conversation. I was a nice guy, I thought. I didn't sling you motherfucker and shit like that. I was giving him an opportunity to be a man and say what he's saying everywhere else. But 9 times, you know what? 9 times out of 10, they do the same thing. They turn bitch and they start screaming because they know they got busted. And he's just a bitch. And that's the reality of it. So if this scumbag emails you, just fucking block him. Just block him. Now, I'm sure as a result of this, because I gave him a little attention that mommy and daddy never could, that he's definitely going to attempt now to really ramp it up. And he says he's never going to stop. And that's okay, too. You know, everybody has to have a hobby when they're a 43-year-old fucking nothing. Because that's what he is. He's a fucking nothing. If you invested half the fucking time you took to fucking try to slander me, maybe you'd be something other than a fat, stupid fuck. But that's all you are, is a fat, stupid fuck who never amounted to fucking shit, who mows lawns for a fucking living. Real high expectations there, you prick. 10-year-olds mow lawns for fucking money. Jerk off. All right, so that being said, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into some more Mob Talk Radio. On a given week, I'm out of town a lot. Whether it's Philadelphia, it's New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, wherever the case may be, I'm always looking for a place where I can sit down and have a great dinner. Ambiance is key. Price is obviously key. But the most important thing is the food good? And there's a place I want to tell you about today. It's called Saltwater at Margate. If you are going down to the shore, because I know a lot of people in Philadelphia go to the shore, especially Margate, you're missing out on a great restaurant if you haven't been there. The name is Saltwater Margate. It's at 9401 Ventnor Avenue, Margate City, New Jersey. The phone number there is 609-289-8078. You can also visit them online at saltwatermargate.com. This place is unbelievable. Not only is the food absolutely superb, the price is great too. They're renowned for their pizza and their gnocchi. They have all kinds of different things from mussels to roast pork and Italian fare. So do yourself a favor, do me a favor, go and visit Saltwater Margate. You will not be disappointed. It is a place that I think at some point, if not already, there's going to be lines out the door and around the block. So if you're down on the shore, stop in, go to Saltwater Margate. At least check them out online at saltwatermargate.com. I know at times we like to have a lot of fun on this show, but it's time to get serious about one thing. I know that the coronavirus pandemic has hurt a lot of my listeners and their businesses. Restaurants have been ordered to close, gyms have been ordered to close, cigar lounges have been ordered to close, and even bars have been ordered to close. These are small businesses that don't always have the cash reserves to continue making their rent or mortgage payments. They can't even pay their vendors. My good friend Mike Kaysen of Kaysen & Kaysen is an experienced bankruptcy lawyer that is there to help you right now. Kaysen & Kaysen represents individuals and small businesses in complex bankruptcy proceedings in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, and Miami. Give Mike a call at 646-397-6226, and if you mention Mob Talk Radio, he's going to give you a free consultation. Once again, it's Mike Kaysen of Kaysen & Kaysen, 646-397-6226. And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. Right before we get started into the Q&A, I wanted to talk about books for a minute. And the reason why I want to is a lot of people are always asking me, what's a good Mafia book? Now, everybody knows that I'm a fan of T.J. English, who has written The Westies, Havana Nocturne, which is one of the best mob period books about Meyer Lansky, Cuba, Batista and Castro, the Kennedys, and kind of how the mob took advantage of Batista being soft and pretty much ran fucking Cuba like a fucking like Las Vegas back in the day. So that's a great book. But there is a book I wanted to talk about, and the book is called From Murder Incorporated to the PGA Tour: The Remarkable Untold Story of Charlie the Bug Workman and his son, PGA Pro Chuck Workman. It is written by Chuck Workman with Peter Cimino. And I'll be honest, before I heard about this book, I had heard about Charlie the Bug Workman. In case you don't know, Charlie the Bug Workman was a member of Murder, Inc. He's widely responsible for whacking Dutch Schultz. He knew a lot of famous people, and his son, I don't want to spoil the book for you, but his son became a PGA Golf Tour pro. And there's a lot of stories about him gambling on his skills and stuff like that. But it's really about a son who sort of comes to terms with who his father is. Now, when I received this book, Pete Cimino was really, really good about sending me a copy. He autographed it for me. And quite possibly I was going to talk to Chuck Workman about his father, but sadly Chuck passed away. So that opportunity never really prevailed itself. But if you're into Frank Sinatra, Milton Berle, Frank Costello, Gyp DeCarlo, Mickey Cohen, Tommy Lucchese, Tony Provenzano, this book has some names and some stories in it that absolutely is historical. And it's a riveting look through organized crime through the eyes of Chuck Workman's son. It's about his father's past, it's about his friends, about his occupation, and it's really a historical reference to the days long gone. And please, if you never listen to nothing I say, I don't even care if you don't fucking like me. This is a great book, and everybody should go out and read it. Once again, it's called From Murder Incorporated to the PGA Tour: The Remarkable Untold Story of Charlie the Bug Workman and his son, PGA Pro Chuck Workman. And it is written by Chuck Workman Jr. and Peter Cimino. And Peter Cimino is a very, very good writer. I like his stuff. I don't even know how many other books he has, but this book was truly, you couldn't put it down. And I've read it several times. It's that fucking good. I mean, we're talking the days of fucking Luciano and Dutch Schultz, and his father was a large part of that. And he was very well respected by Russell Buffalino and a lot of other high people. So if you get a chance, go out and get this book. Okay, so per the usual, we're going to go and start the Q&A. If I get to your question, I hope that's the case in this situation. I've got like 250 questions I'm trying to deal with. And so somebody asked me the other day, when you're doing questions, what do you, how do you sort of formulate this? Well, basically what I do is I take all the questions and I put them into my little fucking writing program here, and I don't answer them. I might write little notes or something if I want to expound on something, but the reality is I just put down them all, and then I go through an hour before I do the show. And some things I'm just not going to answer. Some things have just been repeatedly asked every week for fucking 3 years, and I'm just not going to answer them. So if I don't get to them, A couple of different reasons. One, I've either answered it 100,000 times before. Two, it's a little sensitive, meaning I may know people and I just don't want to just get engrossed in that kind of thing, or it's just a topic that is its own show in and of itself. So you can follow us on Facebook, type in Mob Talk Radio, give a like, subscribe, a follow. We're over on YouTube, Mob Talk Radio. Please subscribe on YouTube. If you do nothing else, subscribe. Even if you hate me, let me know you hate me. So there is one question that I did want to answer right off the bat of why I do not have YouTube comments allowed. Well, first of all, the most important reason is because people will use that as a platform to say stupid shit, to insult each other, to attack people, to attack me. I don't give a shit if people attack me. I could take that all day long. But when other people attack people who just want to come to the page or to the show page just to leave a comment or ask a question, and then these fucking psychopaths just start jumping on them and saying horrible shit to them, I disallowed my comments once again, not because I can't take the shit, because I could take it, but I don't like it when 1,000 people come to enjoy my show and ask an honest question, and fucking 50 or 60 jerk-offs like the Jarrett Hams of the fucking world just fucking attack them nonstop. It's not fair to them. They're there to fucking enjoy the show, and that's why I don't do it, because you can bully me all fucking day. I really don't give a fuck. But you're not going to bully people that do try to come to YouTube and enjoy listening to a radio show. Isn't that the whole point? This schoolyard bully mentality is bullshit. You fuckers need a real life. And really, frankly, you need your asses beat. Because apparently you didn't get beat up enough as a child, so you're extricating your personal fucking problems onto everybody else. So, all right, the first question we got is it true that Elvis Presley, when he was in Las Vegas, would dine with gangsters? Yeah, Elvis Presley, who I'm a fan of, was a part of the Dixie Mafia. A lot of people have said he was a rat for the DEA. There's a lot of proof that sort of shows that he did do that. But as far as Elvis, like a lot of entertainers of his day, they're out in Vegas. The gangsters show up. They have dinner with them. They treat them nice. And Elvis was a fucking rebel. Elvis would hang out with pretty much about anybody. And like we saw when Frank Sinatra was with Carlo Gambino and some other people, they're just not going to say no. They're just going to do it. And that's really it. And obviously I'm an Elvis fan. And sort of probably I should say this, because apparently people think that I'm trying to hide something. So let me just get this out in the open. So years and years and years ago, we're talking a decade or more, right? I was doing a small film, and a part of the character for that film really was sort of, I don't want to say like an Elvis impersonator, but he was just the two main characters, and I don't want to talk about the whole fucking thing because we'll be here all day, but at the end of the day, the character that I was playing sort of had an affinity for Elvis, and it was, these two guys were stuck in the 1970s and all this kind of stuff, and one of them talked like Dusty Rhodes, the fucking wrestler, the other one sort of talked like Elvis, and so I did these videos sort of trying to attempt to get into character, and a lot of people liked them. They were funny, but people are putting those out now like I'm trying to hide the fact that I fucking did it, and it's pretty stupid. I think we've all done videos when we were 15, 16 years old, 17 years old, 20 years old, whatever, that are still on YouTube that people will dig up and they'll try to use against me. And here's the point, right? So I think there's a couple of videos, whatever the fuck. The whole point is that if they were embarrassing to me, if they somehow made me look bad, why would I still allow them to be up? So once again, it's another system of these fucking jerk-offs who got nothing better to fucking do. Ain't that right, mama? Oh, thank you very much. So fuck you. All right, next question. What the fuck is with these people who keep posting photos of themselves with gangsters? What kind of self-esteem do these people have? Well, that's one of the things that I keep asking myself. What I really try to practice, I always haven't been good at it, I'll be honest with you, but you go on my Instagram, you're going to see me with this guy, that guy, just friends of mine. I don't get any sort of hard on for gangsters. I don't need to take photos with people to validate who I am. People that need to validate themselves by standing next to somebody are fucking, they got a fucking personal defect that I can't even begin to psychologically fucking explain to you. Listen, so there's a photo of me and Vinny Pazienza, the boxer. Okay, he's from Providence. My family roots are from Providence. Vinny Pazienza was like a hero in my house. My father loved Vinny Pazienza. I have the opportunity to sit next to him and talk to him for a while. To me, that was like a great honor for me. He took time out of a fight that we were at mutually to talk to me. He's a good guy, a nice gentleman, hell of a boxer, came back from incredible fucking odds to win the fucking title. And yet, what do these assholes do? Post the photos. It's like they're obsessed with me. I don't get it. But the point is that just because you know this one, that one, doesn't mean you need to fucking take photos. I see this shit all over the place, and it makes me fucking sick because who you stand next to does not define who you are. You are who you are because of you. Me sitting next to fucking Alice Cooper isn't going to make me any more special. So, you know, I see it all the time. And to me personally, I think it's fucking stupid. But, you know, everybody wants to be somebody. You know, everybody wants their 10 minutes of fame. Everybody wants to be trending and all of this stupid fucking nonsense that really at the end of the day doesn't mean a fucking hill of beans. But that's just, you know, that's a self-esteem issue. All right. Who would you yourself call the top 3 bosses, underbosses, and consiglieres of all time, and then put your team together, and then make a family name for them? So are we talking all-time top 3 or just like my personal favorites? So I guess I'm going to go with my top 3 bosses first, which would be Vincent the Chin Gigante, Ray Patriarca, and Carlo Gambino. As far as underbosses, Neil Dellacroce, probably Sal Catalano, definitely Willie Moretti, who was with the Genoveses. As far as my 3 consiglieres, Quiet Dom Cirillo, hands down, probably Salvatore Profaci, and probably Joe Carrazzo. That's just the way it is. The family name, the Fukiaks. We call them the Fukiaks. If you're Italian, you know what that means. Fukiak. We'll call them the Fukiaks. All right. Can you name some underbosses or consiglieres, maybe even captains that would have been more suited to be the boss other than the guy that was actually in charge? We all know that Mr. Neal would have been an example when he was under Castellano. Any other names that may come to your mind? I think some could argue that the Colombos would have been better served by Wild Bill Cotolo than Carmine Persico, but it really just depends. I mean, I think Tony Salerno would have been a great boss in any family, and he was. He was a front boss, a street boss, but the Chin really was just as crafty as the other guys. Joe Biondo would have been a great boss for the Gambinos. But I think it's tough to name names in this instance only because of the time period. I mean, if we go way back to like the 1950s, I think most of the guys that they had were absolutely the right choice, albeit probably not Vito Genovese because he was a fucking wackadoodle. But Vito Genovese was also tough. I think absolutely if I was going to pick one wrong total fucking choice, Joe Colombo being a boss should have never fucking happened. But I would have loved, I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, if there was one guy I wish I could have seen as a fucking boss of a crime family, would have been Sonny Francis, hands down. Imagine the nutty shit he would have fucking done. All right. Is it true that Jimmy the Gent was embraced by the Italian-run mob? Books come across that he was one of the few Irish guys to be held in high regard. A good earner and respected. Thanks. Loved the show. Jimmy Burke was feared. He was feared. Not only could Jimmy Burke fucking earn money like crazy, but people were scared shitless of the guy. He was the epitome of a gangster's gangster. And I don't say that because he was fucking Irish, even though I'm half Irish, whatever the case. Jimmy Burke was just a fucking gangster. Look at Joe Watts. Joe Watts, who's not fucking German, by the way. The same fucking pinhead keeps fucking going on his little fucking podcast going, Joe Watts was fucking German. His nickname was the fucking German for other reasons. He was actually Welsh and fucking Irish, and if you were a fucking gangster, a true gangster, I think you would know that. So the next fucking stool pigeon that tries to tell me he's German is getting kicked right in the fucking nuts. Stop reading books. Stop making up delusions. He was not German. Not fucking German. It was just his fucking nickname. If you're in the streets, you should know that. If I know that, I'm not in the fucking streets. How can you not know that? But Jimmy Burke, I am working on a Jimmy Burke project. I can't really, I signed a non-disclosure agreement. I can't get into it, but I am working on something that is Jimmy Burke motivated. And I think it's going to be really good. But Jimmy Burke was just one of those fucking guys maybe it's the right time period. But Jimmy Burke had an incredible fucking life. And Jimmy Burke, you know, they called him the gent for a reason. He was a dangerous guy. He earned a lot of money, but he also had a really fucked up childhood. And you know, next coming months, you'll hear more about the project that I am working on. But Jimmy Burke was definitely respected and feared by the Italians. I've always said that if there was going to be a non-Italian ever made, he probably would have been the first fucking guy that you would have made. All right. Oh boy. All right. I know a lot of older guys from the Scarfo crew have been released recently. When an older guy comes out of jail after, say, 20 or 30 years, is he restored to his former position? Or does he have to start over from the bottom? Or would he just be told, go away, nobody remembers you? In Philadelphia, you know, that's I got to admit, that's a really, really, really sort of funny comment. Because, you know, I could see guys in South Philly going, go away, nobody fucking here remembers you, pigeon. You know, that would be something that they would say. But in this particular case in the question, not always. I mean, sometimes, look, you got guys in the mob and they enter prison and they're one rank, and when they come out, they're no longer that rank, because everything moves like puzzle pieces, especially when you go to prison. So just because you go to prison doesn't mean you're going to lose rank, but you got to understand too that, hold on, I got to adjust my mic here. But you got to understand at the same time, guys are going to move up and down the chain of command. And so when you get out, you're just not automatically handed anything. Usually what I've seen in particular cases is that guys that do come out after a long time, usually as a sign of respect, if there's room, can get the nod to be a captain, can move up the ranks a little bit. And some guys, when they come out, do retain their rank. Obviously, you know, I can use an example here of Phil Narducci. Phil went to prison for like close to 30 fucking years. He comes out and everything's different on the streets. I mean, everything. And I'm not saying that that's what Phil's doing. I'm just using an example of a name of a situation where a guy goes to prison for a long time and then comes out. Listen, and as far as Phil goes, I mean, nobody owed him a fucking thing, right? I mean, he kept his mouth shut. He did a ton of time. And that's why when guys come out, they're given respect. That's why olive branches are extended. And I'm only using Phil Narducci as a reference point. The same can be said for anybody that's done a shitload of fucking time. Luciano, you know, he could have gone away to prison for fucking mopery or whatever the fucking prostitution charge was that he got, come out, and they could have totally replaced him. They didn't. They could have done the same thing to John Gotti when he went away the first time. So I think a lot of it just depends on, one, your capabilities. Can you earn? Can you kill? If you can do those kind of things and you go away to prison and then you get out, they don't have to give you anything. They could say, welcome back to the fucking neighborhood. It's business as usual. They can up you, they can give you a promotion and rank. It just depends on, A, who the boss is. It depends on how well you're liked and respected. You know, if you're a fucking nickel and dime shitheel and a cocksucker to people, they don't give a fuck. You go away, all right, we're going to absorb your rackets, take your fucking money. When you get out, you got nothing. You got no guts. So that's the reality of it. If you, oh man, I really don't want to fucking, all right, I can go here with this. Recently, like Anthony Stano gets out of prison, right? Keeps his mouth shut, does his thing, just wants to go about his fucking life. But then you listen to Ratweiser and Anastasia and they call him a fucking bartender. They make him irrelevant. And then they say that he was reduced in rank and then he was shelved. And I'm not saying that that's what happened, because the last thing I want to do is talk about somebody I don't know. But I'm giving you an example, and I want you to listen to me close, because people will hear what I'm saying and they will fucking manipulate what I'm about to say. Just because I use a guy as a reference, it's so that people understand. When you have journalists that say, oh, this guy was reduced in rank, he was thrown out of the mob, he was shelved. That's not necessarily true. That's gossip that these fucking people repeat and report like it's fact. And so I'm using this to the extent of giving you examples of how guys go to prison and they come out and they're either valid or they're invalid. They're either in or they're out. It just depends on who you are. And it depends on what is going on in that city, what's going on within the organization. And that's why I use those guys as a reference. That's the only fucking reason. And it comes down to what gaps can be filled. I mean, can you be trusted? Can you earn? If you can't earn, then what value do you have to anyone? If you can't rub two dimes together, you can't make a fucking money. What is it that you're offering them? The days of guys killing each other in the streets are fucking over. It's been over for a long time. Today's mafia is a cash machine. If you cannot earn, if you cannot spread money around, what the fuck are you worth something for? The days of a guy popping a guy's skull open are pretty much done. I mean, listen, we're still gonna have moments and instances of that, but the days of the old school shit are done for the most part. All right. So I hope that answers that. And once again, for anybody that's going to try to distort what I just said, do me a favor, listen to it 5 fucking times and keep playing it back so that you get what I'm saying. Because some asshole's going to run off with this and go, oh, he's talking shit about this one. He's saying this or he's validating that. It's just an example only. All right. Does Salvi Testa get hit if he would have married into the Merlinos instead of backing out and ending good relationships with them? Well, that's assuming naturally that everything that we've ever heard, which has never been validated by the Merlinos, has never been validated really by anybody but rats. I can't tell you if for certain any of those things happened. But I can tell you that that's not why Salvi Testa was killed. I don't think. Do I think what Salvi Testa did was disrespectful? Absolutely. What he did was disrespectful. Did it warrant killing him? Maybe to some people. Maybe the disrespect and the honor was too much. But I don't really. Then this person expounds a little bit more and says, and let me be clear, I know that's not why he was killed, but I wonder if having this full support of the Merlinos would have protected him from little Nicky Scarfo. It wouldn't have protected him from Nicky Scarfo at all. Look, Nicky, just as a character reference, he was a jealous, nutty little fuck. He was like a tick, like a bug. And I think, really honestly, what got Salvi Testa killed was really the press in Philadelphia. I'll be honest with you. The press is responsible for that. Granted, Nicky Scarfo was a schizophrenic little shitbag fucking nut job. But the press really was responsible for the lore and the legend that became Salvi Testa. I haven't found one person, believe it or not, who has ever really come to me and says, you know, that guy Salvi Testa was a piece of shit, got what he deserved. I've never heard anybody say that. Did he disrespect like Joey Merlino's sister? Did he respect Joey Merlino's father? Absolutely. That's a disrespectful fucking thing. Nobody has to marry nobody. But at the end of the day, you respect somebody's feelings. I mean, his daughter got hurt. What would you do if it was your kid? So ultimately, Nicky is going to exploit that, and he exploits it for his own gain. He says, oh, okay, Chucky Merlino wants him fucking dead. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to kill him. But that's really not what Nicky's antithesis was. And here's my point. If the press does not start calling Salvi Testa the Prince of South Philadelphia's Mafia, if they don't keep regurgitating that, maybe that doesn't start to sink into Nicky Scarfo's fucking head. Maybe Nicky Scarfo doesn't need to get jealous. Nicky Scarfo doesn't need to worry that Salvi Testa at some point can rival him. And that's why fucking Scarfo killed him. That's exactly why Nicky Scarfo had him killed. Had nothing to do with disrespecting the Merlinos, because I don't think ultimately at the end of the day Nicky Scarfo really gave a fuck. I really don't think he needed a reason, a passable reason to kill a captain, and that was it. It had to sit well within the ranks, and so Nicky used it to his advantage. Oh, look at this guy. He's calling himself the Prince of the South Philly Mob, and then the fucking reporters pick up on it, and everywhere he reads, Salvi, Salvi, Salvi. What the fuck do you think Nicky Scarfo was going to do? I mean, really, at the end of the day, Scarfo could have let the Riccobanis fucking walk. He didn't need their fucking money, but instead, he tries to shake them down and then goes to fucking war with them. So that's the reality of the mindset of Nicky Scarfo. Look, he feared Salvi was going to rival him. He thought he was getting too much power. And the sad part is, if I have to be completely honest with you, he kills the only fucking guy in South Philadelphia that was loyal to him. And I'm not trying to say anything disparaging about anybody else, but Salvi Testa was fucking loyal to Nicky Scarfo. He kills the only loyal motherfucker that Scarfo had in his corner. Salvi would have killed for Scarfo. In fact, he did multiple times. Salvi would have gone to war with Nicky Scarfo to protect him. But the mistake Scarfo makes is he kills Salvi Testa and lets that fucking bum fucking Phyllis Leonetti live. If he whacks Phil Leonetti, maybe not a lot of people go to prison. So that's the mistake that Nicky made. Excuse me. All right. Seems like there's never any mention of the the New Jersey family when people talk about Philly and Atlantic City. Did they not deal with each other? Why are there not more stories of them having interaction? I think a lot of the reason is because New York has representation in Jersey. They have for a long time. The five families all have guys down there. I always thought that Jersey, I always really honestly, and I still maybe to this day still believe that I always thought Jersey should be left to Jersey. I think Jersey should have been its own fucking family on its own. Maybe Philadelphia and New Jersey cut the South and North and Atlantic City up a little bit, which I think in some ways it is. But I've always thought that because the DeCavalcantes did not directly control all of Jersey, I think it really, it handicapped them just not only financially, but in power-wise. Granted, New York did give them certain other areas to operate in, but I've always wondered why the old bosses didn't give New Jersey and Philly bosses the same damn respect that Philadelphia and New Jersey gave them. It always seemed like a big brother picking on a little brother type of situation. But I think, it probably comes down to an ego thing. And maybe keeping the foot on the throat of Jersey, kept the DeCavalcantes in line enough so that if they ever thought for 1 second they could be subversive or they could just sort of make a move, I think, New York putting their foots on their throats probably quelled that idea pretty much very quickly. Look, if it were me and I was the boss of Jersey and Paul Castellano sends me the Cherry Hill Gambino guys, I'm getting a gun and I'm going to kill them on sight for even thinking that they could fucking do that. Of course, it's easy for me to say that. I'm not one of them guys, but I think that, Sam the plumber should have taken a hardline stance and he should have put bullets in those motherfuckers. If he does that, he keeps the Jersey territory. And I don't know all the ins and outs. Obviously, I wasn't at commission meetings. I'm not sitting in Mafia meetings every week or whatever the case may be. But I think with all due respect to Carlo Gambino, with all due respect to Tommy Lucchese, with all due respect to Vito Genovese, with all due respect to Tommy Gagliano, Joe Profacci, and Joe Bonanno, what makes them more powerful than Sam the plumber or Angelo Bruno or or Salvatore Sabella? What makes them better? It doesn't. It's territory, it's turf, it's money, and it's a wider area. But I think that if you're a boss, Ray Patriarca had a seat on the commission. They respected him like you have no fucking idea. Did they give the same respect to Salvatore Sabella? Did they give the same respect to fucking Angelo Bruno? Without Bruno's friendship with Gambino, take that away, then what? So, and I'm not like pitting Philadelphia, New Jersey versus New York, and I'm not anti-New York at all. What I'm simply saying to you is I think if you're a boss, it should be mutually respected across the board. A guy in Philadelphia should be as respected as a fucking guy in New York, as respected as a guy in Florida, as respected as a guy in fucking Louisiana and fucking Vermont, wherever the fuck, Rhode Island. It should be equal. You're a boss, you're a boss, you're a boss. Nobody's higher or above you. And I think, like I said, and I don't want to go on and on and on about it, but I think that's a lot of the problem that Jersey's had. And I think that's why they don't get a claim. They don't get a claim because it's not popular to talk about New Jersey. New York, they always, and listen, I live in New York. I was born in New York. But the thing is that they always put New York at the top of the heap, right? They're always what everybody wants to allegedly acquire to be or attain to be. And in a way that kind of discriminates against Philadelphia, Rhode Island, and New Jersey and all these places, especially when you're going to talk about organized crime. You got 5 families here, probably close to 1,500 to 2,000 guys total, versus New Jersey, who's probably got 40. So you see my point. It's not popular to talk about something that isn't like, they always make this argument that New York is the Ivy Leagues of the mob and everyone else is underneath. I don't agree with that. I think the Mafia is the Mafia. To say that a guy from Brooklyn is any more powerful than a fucking guy in South Philadelphia, to me, is a little fucking nonsense. It's nonsense. So there you go. All right, 2 questions for you. First question is, if Joey Gallo never went to prison, when he did, would things have been different? And the second question is Lefty Ruggiero related to Angelo Ruggiero? And if so, why were they in different families? Lefty and Angelo were not related whatsoever to my knowledge, not even cousins. As far as Joey Gallo goes, look, I think sooner or later he ultimately would have been probably fucking killed. I mean, but then again, we can make an argument that him being out on the streets would have been better for him. As far as, see, it's one of these things. Like, Joey Gallo in prison kept him alive a lot longer than he probably could have been. Then again, there is an argument to say that if Joey Gallo was still in the streets, he could have done a little more. I certainly wouldn't have given Joe Colombo the opportunity. That's fucking straight up. I just wouldn't have done that. So in that case, I think, and I would agree, that if Gallo never goes away, he might have just taken over the Colombo crime family himself. And look, I don't care what anybody says. Gallo was more apt to be a boss than Joe Colombo was. If you compare the two together, Joey Gallo would have been a good boss, but Joey Gallo is a little fucking nutty. And I also think that Joey Gallo is massively underrated as a gangster, but he was probably overrated as what he was, which directly kind of goes against what I just said. But I think that people put Joey Gallo as a boss when in reality he was a crew leader of a couple of guys. Would he have been a great boss? He would have been better than Colombo. That's 100% for sure. But Gallo's biggest mistake was thinking that his crew could take on everybody, and they just simply couldn't. Look, smart guys have a way of forging alliances with other captains from other families, and Gallo really wasn't that kind of guy. I also kind of sort of look at Joey Gallo like Mr. Blonde in Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs. Just sort of and the reason why I say Mr. Blonde is because Mr. Blonde was kind of on his own, doing his own thing. He was still part of a crew and an organization, but he kind of did his own little nutty shit. And that's why I make that comparison. All right. So my question is reference to the divide on the commission between the Profaci, Bonanno, Gambino, Lucchese families. If they went to straight war with each other, who do you think would have come out on top? And in this scenario, the Genovese crime family remains neutral. In my opinion, people will disagree with me, but I think Gambino Lucchese, and I say that because Profaci, while wealthy, was not a wartime boss. And I can already hear people going, oh, he's using the line from The Godfather. No, that line was, you're not a wartime consigliere. So no, that's Profaci was not a wartime boss, and really, honestly, neither was Joe Bonanno. Bonanno, would have fought back, but he would have directed those orders from 4,000 miles away. That's just kind of the way he was. I just think Gambino and Lucchese were a lot more proficient at ending problems and ending them very fucking quickly. I know I give Joe Bonanno a lot of shit for his book and his mouth and his cowardice. But that's the whole problem with Joe Bonanno. He was so stuck in his head about how great he was that he ignored simple problems that he could have fixed with his own family. And his own family at the end of the day ended up turning on him. If Bonanno had not attempted to kill the entire fucking commission, he honest to God, and I'm saying this with all due respect to him, I believe that after Carlo Gambino dies, I think Joe Bonanno would have been boss of bosses had he not pulled all the bullshit he did. And that's really secretly what he always wanted to. That was his opus with his fucking book, is look at me, look at me, look at me. I should have been this, I should have been that. Well, at the end of the day, his ego gets in the way. And even if he and Profaci went to war with Gambino and Lucchese's, forget it. Just forget it. He likely probably would have shoved Joe Profaci in front of an oncoming train if he thought he could blame his dog Sparky for it. That's just the way that Joe Bonanno was. All right, what are your thoughts on Tom Hardy playing Al Capone for the new 2020 movie? The trailer looks good, thanks. Look, with any historical mafia genre fucking film, I always worry about a couple of things. And really the main thing is I always worry about the story. I don't need an actor to look identical to the character, but the storyline in this Capone film, it's a little fucking weird to me. Al Capone's having hallucinations from the jungle crotch plague that he was suffering from. So I'm not exactly, interested in that perspective. I think Tom Hardy's a terrific actor. I just, for my own taste, my own personality and what I like, I'd rather see a historically accurate film. Give me the politics, give me the hits, give me the gore, give me the Italian culture. I just think Hollywood is more interested in 10 minutes of facts and an hour of CGI bullshit than they are anything else these days. Eventually, listen, I'll sit down and I'll watch it, but for me personally, I'd rather see a biographical film. I'm sure some of you have seen, I am working on a Jimmy Burke thing as we speak. It's entitled Burke. And I talked about this earlier, but that's it. All right, are the Cherry Hill Gambinos still an active crew? If so, are they a part of the Philadelphia family or still with the Gambinos? Well, if they're called the Cherry Hill Gambinos, why would they be in the Philadelphia Mafia? Now, I'm not making fun of you. You answered your own question. Are they still in Jersey? Gambinos still have active representation in Jersey? Yes. All right. You know how in sports we always hear the conversation of how players from older generations would fare in today's professional sports, like Jordan in today's NBA or Babe Ruth in today's Major League Baseball. I'm not a big hockey guy, but what would Wayne Gretzky do in today's NHL answer? Or NHL, what would he do today in today's NHL? I don't think Wayne Gretzky would have half the fucking records he did. Now, let's be honest about something. I have never been a Wayne Gretzky fan. I was always a Mario Lemieux fan. I was always a Penguins fan. And here's the thing. Contrastly, if you look at the NHL in the 70s, obviously they had giant afros and swung sticks like fucking axes and beat the shit out of everybody. Unfortunately, there was an unwritten rule in the NHL, and it was that you did not hit Wayne Gretzky, which is exactly how Marty McSorley's career was able to withstand a decade before he did the dumb shit to Donald Brashear. Listen, if guys could have put a hip check on Gretzky, if guys were allowed to hit Gretzky doesn't have those records. Conversely, look at Mario Lemieux when he came into the league. Mario Lemieux was abused, and I know Flyers fans are going to fuck him. I already know what Flyers fans are going to say. But the proof is the clutching, the grabbing, the defensive style was not the same when Gretzky was in the league. They didn't clutch and grab. They just slashed the shit out of you, pulled your hair, beat the shit out of you. Well, Gretzky couldn't do that. If you even breathed on Wayne Gretzky, you were going to the penalty box or you're getting thrown out of the fucking game. You have no idea. And listen, Flyers fans are going to love what I'm about to say. I so wanted to see Dave Schultz beat the shit out of Wayne Gretzky. Because Gretzky was kind of a little bitch. He was the greatest player that ever played in the NHL, but he's kind of a little bitch. I got to say that. But if the clutching and grabbing that Mario Lemieux played, if the clutching and grabbing from the defense was that way in Wayne Gretzky's era, I really don't think Wayne Gretzky would have done as much as he did. Also, the league has completely changed. The league is very fast. The clutching and grabbing is gone. Even the kind of hitting is kind of backed off a little bit. But I don't think Gretzky could have kept up with the speed. Gretzky had magnificent fucking hands. I just don't think, in this day and age. And you know what? I could say the same about Mario Lemieux. I don't necessarily know if his skill set would transfer over to today's NHL. But a lot of that has to do with defensive styles. But absolutely no way I don't think Gretzky ever becomes the player that he was today. And because I think overall talented, you also got to look at the time period when Mario Lemieux played. Goons. They had two lines of goons. You had four lines and two guys that just beat the shit out of everybody. Nowadays, you don't even have goons in the league. So there's a big transition from the days of Donnie Brooks and knock 'em drag out fights, which, listen, I got to hand it to the Flyers. The 70s NHL highlights are one of my favorite things to watch, and the Flyers are no fucking Broad Street bullies. You can't, listen, you may not like Philadelphia, you may not like the Flyers. I hate the fucking Flyers because I'm a Penguins fan, but you can't take away the Broad Street bullies, the 1970s. You just can't take that away. All right. Why does that rat Philly and Eddie thinks he has to sit in the dark while being interviewed anymore? Is there really anyone interested in taking him out, or does he really think he's still relevant after all of these years? It is as far as Leonetti goes, and I've talked a lot about him. He's not relevant. He's only relevant because he chose to open his mouth, and that's the thing. Look, all these fucking guys are mob rats. They're relevant now because there's nothing else to watch on TV. Everybody's stuck at fucking home. They don't want to fucking do nothing because of this fucking coronavirus bullshit. And the rats pick the right time to fucking start their bullshit. Why anybody? Why anybody gives them an inch, I will never fucking understand. Listen, I'm going to tell you what, Leonetti sitting in the fucking dark like a closeted fucking weirdo is probably what he should do. Obviously, that shows that he's still afraid of Philadelphia, and he probably should be. But at the end of the day, he's not relevant. Nothing he says really. Listen, my uncle. That's all he could talk about. He is defined by his uncle. Whereas other gangsters were defined by themselves. His uncle, my uncle. He sounds like a broken record. Somebody ought to break it and stick it up his fucking ass, that guy. But yeah, there you go. He's not relevant. All right. Jeff, I have a quick question, and it was just an imaginary question. Who do you think would have won the war against each other? Capone's outfit versus Dutch Schultz's organization? And who was more successful in your opinion? Obviously, who would win in a war? Probably Capone. Those guys were ruthless. Capone had a fuckload of guys underneath of him that would kill. Dutch Schultz was very, wow. Well, it depends. Dutch Schultz organization, are you talking about Murder Inc.? Because if you're talking about Murder Inc., that opens up a whole nother fucking line of conversation that we should have. But I think if it's just Dutch Schultz and a couple of people, Capone's got them. But Murder Inc. was also utilized by Capone and other people. So it's a tough thing to answer because I'm not exactly sure which direction you're going. But if it's Capone and 10 guys versus Dutch Schultz and 10 guys, Capone hands down. But if you're talking, big time shit, then I'd have to give it to Schultz only because he had Murder Inc. behind him and Albert Anastasia, and etc. So, all right, even though he ultimately became a rat before that happened, how would you rank little Al Diarco as an acting boss in comparison to others? He's a rat, so therefore anything that he might have done prior to that is null and void to me. You lose all due respect. With all due respect, I mean, yeah, we could say, oh, he really made this good decision. The minute you tell on people to get a sentence reduction, you testify against people, it's over. You lose any comparison. You lose any kind of fucking accolade I could give you. All right, who was more ruthless and more of a whack job, Nicky Scarfo or Anthony Gaspipe Casso? And were these two guys, and why were these two guys left to get away with what they did when they were bosses without the commission stepping in? Connections in both cases to the Genovese family? Both were connected to the Genovese family, but Nicky Scarfo really aligned himself more with the Gambino crime family. He was friendly with John Gotti, so that definitely helped. And listen, Nicky Scarfo was connected with the Genoveses too, because it was the Cingigante who really put Nicky Scarfo in charge. And somehow that would kind of manipulate and move a little bit, and Scarfo would get close to Gotti. But yeah, Nicky Scarfo was a whack job, absolutely. But the difference being is Nicky Scarfo didn't get a gun and go kill people himself. Gaspipe Casso did. Gaspipe Casso was the type of guy where he said, you know what? Fuck him. I'm going to kill him. And Gaspipe just didn't kill you. He tortured you first. He ultimately would become a rat too. But of the two of them, I think Gaspipe Casso was a little bit more of a whack job because he would do it himself. There's something to be said for a guy that orders it versus a guy that's willing to fucking do it. All right. With the Last Dance show airing on ESPN about the Chicago Bulls, was Michael Jordan's father killed because of Michael's gambling debts? No, I don't think so. That's been widely distorted by the press for years. It was a simple, I hate to say it like this, black guy driving in Podunk, North Carolina in a very expensive Lexus. And that's all you need to know. That's exactly what it was, a robbery. That's all it was, is a robbery. Because if it's over a gambling debt, they're not going to take the fucking, the championship bull ring off his finger. They're not going to empty his pockets of cash. They're just going to kill him and leave him on the side of the road. So, while I know that the press would love to make this like a Jimmy Hoffa story, it's just not true. All right, how rich is the average boss of the five families, as well as Chicago bosses, Philadelphia, etc.? Well, look, it really depends. A lot of things play into that. Everything from territory to rackets to the size of your family. But I think guys probably made more money back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s than they do today. Listen, construction is always going to be a key factor in that, as well as narcotics. Those are always going to be your two big money makers. If you buy what the FBI alleges, the Gambino crime family under John Gotti was pulling in $400 million a year. I think it's probably closer to $150 million a year, to be honest with you. But I think an average boss in a New York family is pulling anywhere between, the 10 to 20 million a year. At least they should fucking be. In other areas, it's probably a lot less just because their overall territory is smaller. Like Rhode Island, for example, is probably closer to, say, $2 or $3 million just because of a small area and a smaller family. You have to think in terms of let's say the Genovese crime family, right? Let's say that they have 160 guys. That's 10 to 12% of 152, 155, 159 guys. That's a lot of fucking money. You also have to take into consideration that in all reality, not 160 guys of a crime family are all earners. You've got to figure in one family, probably 10 guys make the bulk of the fucking money. So it's not like you got 160 guys making 10 million each and they're all kicking up the 12%. So I can't give you an exact number, but what I really can tell you is this. If I was a boss of a crime family and I have, say, 50 or less members, I better be making, $2.5 to $4 fucking million a year. There's going to be a fucking problem. But if you have, say, over 100 guys, I expect like something like north of 7 to 10 minimum. But what's the fucking point of being a boss if nobody makes any fucking money anyway? I'd rather have 40 earners than 40 killers, and that's just my 2 cents on it. All right. Do you think COVID-19 has slowed the flow of cash with the mob, or have they gotten creative and, in fact, benefiting from the outbreak? Look, I think they've gotten creative where they need to be. I know that masks, gloves, cleaning supplies, they're all being boosted like crazy and sold at a discount in bulk. Guys will make $1 wherever they can right now. Allegedly, some guys have gone into local grocery stores demanding they cut back on prices to help the community. So in some cases, you got guys trying to control price gouging, which is a good thing, believe it or not. And I can say that near where I live, there was a situation where a store was price gouging, and that got handled very fucking quickly. Very fucking quickly. All right. Which other organized crime groups does Cosa Nostra historically work with the most? Narcotics traffickers. That's the main group that the mob really, especially in Europe, deals with. There's no other reason for them. They'll work with the Russians on certain things, with housing projects or shaking down unions, whatever the case may be. But historically, if you're looking for a huge group that they do work with, it's always going to be narcotics guys. All right, how was Benny Eggs rated by the Chin and Tony Salerno? I think he was well respected and well liked. All right, in their prime, who would kill who? Greg Scarpa or Tommy Patera? Ooh, in a pinch, I would probably have to say that Tommy Patera probably has to beat out Scarpa. I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong. I mean, they're both fucking killers, but Tommy Patera's on just a demonic level that I just imagine those two chasing each other in the streets with knives. Holy fuck. But I don't know. I think there's something about Tommy Patera that's a little more calculated, a little more thought out than maybe Greg Scarpa. All right. I want to know what really happened to Jimmy Hoffa. Well, he got shot, was killed, and incinerated. That ends that. All right. Is it true that Ron Previty's brother is going by the name James Garrettson and snitched on Joe Exotic? A good Tiger King reference. Jesus Christ. How do you suppose that John Difronzo avoided the family secrets trial? We're going to get into that today on the show, believe it or not. But the real short answer to that is the feds couldn't get any evidence, and there really wasn't enough to indict him. It's not because he was a rat or anything like that. But we'll get into that. All right. Was Paul Vario really banging Henry Hill's wife? Have you seen what Paul Vario looked like? Have you seen what Henry Hill's wife looked like? Would you put those two together? I know I fucking wouldn't, so no. The answer is no, but he looked like a fucking tuna fish. He looked like the fucking thing off the Star-Kissed tuna can, for Christ's sakes. Just without, he even had the fucking glasses, too. No. A lot of people have, misreported that through the years, too. All right, do you think someone took a run at Gambino towards the end of his life? No, and I don't think they would have either. I just think he had too much power. All right, what do you think of the movie State of Grace with Sean Penn? It's a great movie, one of my favorites. I haven't seen it in a couple of years, but maybe that's an idea for tonight. But definitely a good movie. All right, this may be a little long, so bear with me. Psychologists say a big difference between a sociopath and a psychopath is nature versus nurture. Sociopaths are made, psychopaths are born. Do you think the hard, treacherous lifestyle of a mob life caused sociopathic traits in a lot of mobsters? And do you think having a sociopathic traits helps them become a successful mobster? Seems like a lot of the top mobsters share the same sociopathic traits, such as lack of remorse, superficial charm, manipulation, need for stimulation, pathological lying, selfish, shallow emotions, and sometimes impulsive behavior, including violence. Not saying that all mobsters are psychopaths and sociopaths, but it seems like a lot of them have similar traits. I think guys like Roy DeMeo, Mad Sam DiStefano, and Nicky Scarfo are closer to psychopaths than sociopaths. If we're going to look at the mental side of this, this can open up a lot of doors for a long conversation, and you could get me on a rabbit trail. And I don't really want to get on a rabbit trail with this topic, but it's an important topic, especially when you consider that oftentimes people try to ascertain why somebody does something. This is the only reason why I'm sort of into the whole serial killer shit. And the reason why I am is it's not so much what they do that I'm entranced by, because personally I find it pretty fucking repulsive that anybody could eat another person. I'll be honest with you. But for the sake of this question, a lot of it is I'm into the serial killer shit because I want to know what the fuck, at what point in their life are they sitting on the couch with a can of beer and go, I'm going to fucking put a drill into this guy's head and eat his brains. Like, what does it take to get to that level? And why is it that there aren't steps? Like, you start with mutilating midgets, and then you start by decapitating fucking rats' dicks, or whatever the case may be. How do you go from like the end of the spectrum from A, and you don't hit B, C, D, you go A to Z like immediately? That's why I'm into the serial killer shit, only because it fascinates me on what makes the mind work. Now, in a lot of these cases, there's usually a lot of damage to the frontal lobe. And that is the thing that causes human emotion, and that is the thing that creates remorse, and that creates nervousness and things like that. And they found in a lot of these cases with people that commit mass atrocities that they have issues with their frontal lobes. I think they're seeing a lot of that with football players that have CTE and stuff like that. Is Aaron Hernandez, for a good example, had a lot of fucking frontal lobe damage, and those are the things that control your decision making. And people that have systematically had damage with frontal lobes do crazy shit. These are the types that go to Wendy's with a fucking knife and say, I'm going to kill the next motherfucker that walks in here unless you give me a salad, and they fucking get the salad, but they still fucking kill a motherfucker. So I think that, if we're going to talk about the sociological aspects of what's wrong with some of these guys, look, do I agree that there could be some sort of mental problem? Sure, absolutely. I don't think but here's the thing. You want to argue nature versus nurture, right? I don't think everybody that's born is bad. I think there are things that happen to you within your life as a childhood that form your brain. Like a lot of these kids they put on death row at 14 and 15 years old, it's kind of fucked up. And I'm not saying that you should forgive the crimes that they've committed, because some of them do some really fucking aberrant fucking shit. But the human brain, and it's a proven scientific fact, the human brain is not really developed until you're 17, 18, and 19 years old. So when they convict these kids at 14, 15 years old, while yes, they do know the difference between right and wrong, their brains are not also developed, and they don't have the cognitive ability to understand the long-term ramifications of what they're doing. And I'm not giving anybody an excuse. It's just a scientific fact. So if we are going to apply these sort of things to gangsters, first of all, let me go down the list here. God damn, I swear to God, I never thought I would be talking about psychology on this show. So let's look at top mobsters, right? Majority of them have high IQs. They're not stupid men. These are guys that can run Fortune 500 companies without a problem. The problem is, and I'm not saying all, and I'm not picking on one person or another, but the problem is that while they could, if they had so chosen, to run Fortune 500 companies, they don't want to, because the easy way out. Here's a better argument. Here's a really, really good argument that I can definitely make. Take a guy who's gone to prison for 20 years, okay? He gets out, let's say, by some stroke of luck, he wins the lottery, right? He takes the lottery, he buys a bar. The bar starts making a lot of money. What the fuck does he need to go back in the fucking streets for? Let's say he's making $200,000 or $100,000 a month. Okay, and he's paying his taxes, his rent's like, fucking $3,000 a month. He's paying all his employees. What the fuck does he need to fucking go back to the streets for? It's because of the action. It's the idea of getting over. And that's not a difficult thing to understand. It's the simple complex of you're walking down the street, you see a guy drop a wallet. Maybe fucking 6 of you will return it. Maybe 2 of you will open it up to see how much is in there. And that's the difference. That's the difference. There are some people that will see the wallet, pick it up, and put it in the mailbox. But the majority of people, not the majority, I would say over 65% are going to look and see how much money there is. And if it's anything north of 100, they're going to take that shit. Guaranteed. Because it's about getting over. And not everybody is like that. But at the end of the day, if we talk about superficial charm, listen, when you're in the mob, you got to be able to charm. You got to be able to, because what are you doing? You're trying to fuck everybody that's trying to fuck you. So you got to have those sort of attributes and abilities. Manipulation, same fucking thing. Lack of remorse, listen, you grow up in that lifestyle. If somebody's going to kill you, ultimately it's you or them. You're going to kill them. And I think people that try to make them into psychopaths and sociopaths in that terminology is put yourself in a situation where you have a home intruder come into your house. You're going to kill them, right? You're going to defend your property, defend yourself, defend your kids. And I think that mobsters typically have that same viewpoint. It's either me or them, me or them. And they make that decision at a young age that that's what they're going to fucking do. Shallow emotions. I don't think I've ever met, well, with the exception of one, that has shallow fucking emotions. That is a walking fucking train wreck of a fucking defect as far as no self-esteem. And I've met people like that before. One in particular, impulsive behavior. Look, I think we all have impulsive behavior. It's just to what degree. So, was Roy DeMeo a psychopath? Was he a sociopath? I think he was a fucking nut job. Sam DiStefano, a fucking nut job. Nicky Scarfo, a fucking nut job. But also take into consideration the childhood, right? So if you come from a house where the father's a drunk and beats on you, your mom, your brothers, your sisters, what do you think you're going to do? Odds are, statistically, especially if this happens before your brain is developed, that you technically are going to become an alcoholic yourself. You're going to become violent, because what do kids do? Kids mimic. Good example, when you see these little kids saying curse words and stuff like this on YouTube, and because they're repeating what they hear, and they're not repeating it because they enjoy cursing. They're repeating it because when they do, they get the response of, oh my God, isn't she so funny? Isn't he so fucking funny? And the kid registers with the child's brain of, oh, this makes them laugh, so I'm going to keep doing it because I get the attention. But they don't understand that what they're saying is wrong. And that's why parents that videotape this shit and put it on and think it's funny, it's sort of a fucked up way to treat a kid, because you're telling them, it's okay to do it, it's okay to do it. And then 2 weeks later, you're beating the shit out of the kid or putting a bar of soap in their fucking mouth because they say it. But you have taught that child that that's fucking acceptable. If you nip it in the bud from day one and you say, no, you're not going to do that, this is not the way we talk, they're not going to do it. But when you encourage it, by reinforcing the action, what do you expect? And I think we can apply that to a lot of mob shit, especially if you grew up in a mafia family. If everybody in your family is a gangster, what do you think you're going to do? Very rarely has anybody that grew up inside of a mob family ever decided to become a cop, you know what I mean? Or ever decided to become a lawyer. Well, maybe a lawyer more so than a cop, but you get what I'm saying. So I think that when you apply some of the mental stuff, listen, people aren't born evil. They become evil for their own reasons. I'm not saying gangsters are evil. Because my argument for people when they say to me, how can you fucking call somebody that's killed somebody a friend of yours? Well, here's a simple. Who they killing? Themselves. I cannot argue or have a moral implication about anybody who wants to kill me, and I got to kill them first. I cannot have a moral implication about that. They do what they do. I do what I do. And I listen, if you think somebody's going to kill you and you have to kill them to protect yourself, what's wrong with that? You open up the fucking Bible, and this is the last thing I'm going to say. I'm going to move on. I've been on this too long. If you open up the Bible, all the fucking Bible, especially the Old Testament, is nothing but fire, brimstone, and people killing each other. People killing each other. One after the other, after the other, after the other. You want an exciting book? Read the Bible. Seriously, if you don't have one, go out, buy one, and just read the fucking Old Testament. This is probably going to, I shouldn't go here. But a lot of Christian conservatives make the argument that, well, because the argument with a lot of Southern Baptist type of people is they will say, well, we follow the Bible from beginning to end. We do what the good book says. But they ignore the fucking Old Testament, which is about revenge, an eye for an eye, cut his heart out and stick it in his ass. It's that type of stuff, right? And so then when you look at them, you say, but wait a minute. You say we should follow the Bible. Well, that's okay, because according to the Bible, it's acceptable to beat your wife. It's acceptable to torture your wife. It's acceptable to cut the hand off of any man that touches your wife. It's acceptable to beat the shit out of your wife if she looks at any other man. And the argument you get out of them is, well, that's after the dispensation of Christ, which, i.e., is an excuse for, well, that's old school shit. We've changed our mind. Well, if you're going to hold it up and you're going to say, this is my Bible, I follow it to the letter, then you can't pick and fucking choose. See, I should not have gone here, because this is going to create a lot of backlash for me. And I'm Catholic, by the way, so I got my own shit I got to work on. But reality is, and I think the point I'm trying to get to is that I don't even know how the fuck did I even get here? How the fuck did I even get to this point with religion? End of the day, listen, believe what you want to believe religiously. I got nothing against anybody, but I just... okay. So here's the correlation. So not everybody is born evil, and it's about what you're taught. And if you grow up in a house where murder is an acceptable thing, what do you think you're going to become? So, I can't wait to see the fucking nasty email I'm going to get. Oh, look at him bashing Christians. And that's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying that if you're going to be the type of person that's going to hold up a book and say you follow it to the letter, follow it to the goddamn letter. Don't cherry pick and pick out parts you think you should follow. You either do or you don't. So all that being said, that's Christ. I'm gonna get skewered. People are gonna say I'm anti-Jesus now, anti-Catholic, anti-whatever. Listen, I'm Catholic. I'll always be Catholic. I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. And that's just the end of it. Oh God. Why did I do that? Why did I go there? All right. Anyway, so I just watched the Philly Anetti interview. What's his beef with Joey Merlino? Secretly, here's what I think. I think Leonetti is a closeted Joey Merlino fan. I think he's a fanboy. I don't think he can take the sight of any real man being honorable and true to that cause or to that way of life. I also think there was a lot of jealousy coming out of Leonetti. Look, as if anybody gives a fuck what crimes Joey might have committed as a kid. I've done things as a kid. All of you have done things as a kid. Well, what the fuck are we even bringing that up for? And keep in mind, this is a guy that whacked Vince Falcone. Then he runs off with his cross-dressing girlfriend and marries her. Mink ya. That woman goes with a coonskin, toupee-wearing rat fuck who whacked her boyfriend. What the fuck is wrong with her? Phil was right. He was a part of a family. The fucking Jerry Springer crime family. Fuck Kurupuru too. Ugh. All right. If Joey Merlino was at war with John Stampa after Scarfo's reign as boss, my question is this. Who made Joey Merlino? Was he made under Scarfo? Then was Joey making guys separately from John Stampa? Thanks. According to what law enforcement claims, and I really don't know the answer to this, and I probably could have found out, but this is just the kind of question I'm just not going to ask anybody because it's none of my fucking business. But according to law enforcement, it was John Stampa who made Joey Merlino under sort of the guise of under goodwill. It's a sign of goodwill or whatever. That's just what's been said. As far as Joey making guys separately from Stampa, couldn't tell you. Don't know. Wouldn't even ask. Even if I had the ability to ask that, it's none of my business. I know where I can push and where I can ask, and sometimes these are things that's none of my business. It's not important. But I will say this. I will say this for 100% is that at the same time John Stampa was calling himself boss, there's two factions, and if you have two leaders of two factions, they're going to do whatever the fuck they want. So I don't think that if Joey did that in that case, that would have been against the rules. I think that was Joey's decision. Joey's been making decisions for a long time in South Philadelphia, if you completely buy into what the feds say, and that's that. All right, talk about Frank Collada and the Hole in Wall gang. I have repeatedly, I cannot stomach Frank Collada for any fucking reason. I have talked about the Hole in the Wall gang a lot. Look back on the shows, and you'll see. What is this shit with Joey Merlino this week? For fuck's sakes. And also, somebody said that I write my own questions. So what do I need to do every week? Do I need to put out a list and show you the people's names who asked this shit? All right. Will Joey Merlino do his thing from Florida, or does he head back to South Philly? I think the best way to really answer that is to say Florida is his home. That's where Joey lives. That's where he wants to be. That's where he's going to be. And if we are going to logically assume off the allegations that he is who the alligators say he is, then obviously I think it's a safe assumption that he's going to stay in Florida and do his thing. All right, how much of what Andy Ruggiano Jr. says is true? How come they didn't trust him enough to make him? Here is always what... Okay, so here's what I always say about informants. Take 100% of what they say and reduce it by 90% immediately. Look, while I'm sure that there are some aspects of what informants say is true, I think in most cases they fabricate details to elevate their stature. It would seem that Andy Ruggiano is perfectly okay with not being a tough guy. He's perfectly okay with sort of admitting who he is and just saying, look, at one time in my life, I did this, I did that. I don't know the guy, nor do I want to know him on any level after he became an informant. But he did say one thing that sort of made sense to me on a certain level, all right? Because every once in a while, these guys, and I'm not saying all of them, but once in a while, they say something that makes a little sense to me. And he says, look, my father sat me down, and listen, I'm paraphrasing here, so don't quote me, but he sat me down and he says, look, all the rules are being broken. Guys are snitching left and right. Nobody helps families out financially. Nobody cares about anyone but themselves. So this thing, as we knew it, is over. This thing of ours is over. So on a certain level, I can entertain that idea on a primary level. I think that was probably one of the most honest things I've ever heard come from a rat's mouth in my life, which they never really say honest things, but I thought that I understood that perspective. But then again, so how much of did that conversation ever really take place? That's the second thing we have to ask ourselves. Did he really have that conversation with his father? I don't know why he'd lie about that, but then again, I don't know why guys testify against each other either. So how much of what Andy Ruggiano Jr. claims is the truth? I really don't know. But the thing is, the second you testify and you get yourself out of trouble to get out of jail, you no longer carry any ounce of validity. So while he may tell the truth in certain instances or aspects, I just can't put any faith or any stock into his stories because of what he did. And I think that I think you lose sight. And I think these guys lose the sight that you don't have a fucking voice anymore. Because the minute that you put your fucking selfish needs ahead of everybody else, you have no problem collecting the fucking money from people. That's all good. You have no problem killing motherfuckers. But the minute you think somebody's going to tell you, you can't fucking pull your dick out quick enough to start pissing all over the place. You run to rat. And you lose the right to have a voice the second you put another guy away because you don't want to do fucking time. And I'm never going to change my opinion on that. And I'm entitled to that opinion, just like you fucking people are. 18 million of you fucking yesterday followed fucking Tekashi 6ix9ine, that piece of shit. Listen, of all things, I have never seen a rat in my life go and brag and make fun of the people he ratted on. You think they're not going to find Tekashi 6ix9ine on the fucking side of a gutter at some point? You're out of your fucking mind. Never in my mind have I ever seen a fucking informant come right the fuck out and say, I'm a rat, I don't give a fuck you, you're in jail, I'm not, ha ha ha. What do you think they're going to do to him? Fucking moron, this guy. And I thought that Meek Mill, Philadelphia rapper, Meek Mill had a great fucking response to that. And a lot of people aren't talking about what Meek Mill said. Meek Mill's, first of all, he's a stand-up fucking guy. That's number one. Two, he's a great artist. But what he said is he's saying something nobody else is going to say. 50 Cent could be like, yeah, this guy's a fucking rat, fuck him. Snoop can be like, no snitching, whatever the fuck he wants to say. But Meek Mill said something I've been waiting for somebody to fucking say. And I'm going to paraphrase Meek Mill. You can go onto his Instagram and probably see it for yourself. But he said that Tekashi 6ix9ine should have come out and fucking apologize for being a snitch. Not because he's a snitch, but because he left his fucking girlfriend and his fucking kids in danger because he was a coward. He put his girl and his kids in danger because he wanted to protect himself and his stupid fucking rainbow cocksucker image. That's it. And I think what Meek Mill was trying to say is, you know what, it's all good, dude. You want to be a fucking rat. You want to tell on people, whatever. But as a man, as a fucking man, how could you put your kids and your girl in danger and just throw them to the curb and be like, that's your problem, bitch? Because that's basically what he did. God bless Meek Mill. I've been waiting for somebody to come out and say some shit like that. You know, and I'm sure that the Rainbow fucking Coalition that's behind this little prick is going to, you know, cry to fucking blues. But 18 fucking million people watch this little piece of shit's fucking video. I admit I did because I wanted just to know what the fuck was going on. But he's bragging about being a rat. 18 million fucking people in less than 8 hours. Loved that. What the fuck is going on with this country? What is there's no code. Why is it that fucking people adore people that tell? How can you look past that? First of all, this kid wasn't a street kid. He admits that he fucking paid for protection. You know, I don't understand how people could support that. But you know what? Then again, you know, if people don't grow up around the streets and don't know anything about the streets, it doesn't bother them. And I guess that's just kind of what it is. All right, you're a boss of a family. What kind of proof would you need to have to sanction taking out one of your own guys if another member claimed that he was informant? Or would you take him at his word? For an example, Springfield Crude, Aerolado was going around claiming that Adolfo Bruno was an informant. Look, common sense plays a huge part in this. I think if everybody is getting pinched and one guy isn't, you kind of got to start to wonder, you know. But I think the proof I would need is paperwork. I would need someone from law enforcement to verify it, to double down on it. It's easier to shelve a guy and toss him out of the organization than to kill him and be wrong. You have to remember, mob guys watch each other very close. Any deviation from the normal, any normal conversation, of any dialogue, their ears perk up like a fucking wolf. Consistency is the name of the fucking game. You know, look, I'm a little weird because I don't think I'd let a guy slide, you know, sort of disrespecting anybody. So the difference being is that if you disrespect somebody, I'd have you killed. Because I think respect and honor are important things. And I have sort of an old school mentality. You know, anybody abuses a woman, they would be killed without second thought. Anybody who killed a civilian would be killed without a second thought. That means Gaspike Castle would have been killed, Gravano would have been killed and tortured immediately for what they did. I think anybody who was a former cop is not allowed into the life whatsoever under any fucking circumstances. I do a lot of things that are different, but then again, we're playing on could be's and would be's because I'm not. All right. Say if the killers failed to kill Albert Anastasia, what do you think would have happened back then? Well, first of all, I can tell you one thing. Anastasia would have killed every single person that he thought was involved. So if Anastasia is not killed and they tried to kill him and he lives and he thought Gambino had any involvement, he would kill him. 100%. Also, if the Colombo hit on Joe Colombo had failed, what would have happened? Probably nothing. Joe Colombo did not have the power to do what he needed to get done, especially considering that Gambino was behind that. I don't think Colombo really, I think his reign would have been short either way, because he would have been shelved for the nonsense with the fucking anti-civil liberties union, Italian anti-civil liberties union. I think he just created too many problems. But with Anastasia, he'd have killed fucking everybody. How do you think that Albert Anastasia or Joe Colombo would have responded to a murder contract against them? Anastasia would have killed everybody he thought was involved, and probably Colombo would have had to have gotten aligned himself with somebody that could protect him. All right, let's see. Back in the 80s, many mobsters would go for weeks on a luxury to Belle Harbor, Florida. Is that still a thing? I know, look, Florida's always a destination, but a lot of guys are going to the Dominican Republic now, Costa Rica, the Caribbean. So while that may have been a hot spot in the 80s, it may not be today. All right. Have you seen Bad Blood on Netflix about Vito Rizzuto? I thought it was pretty well done and entertaining, but not that factual. What are your thoughts? I watched 3 episodes, and I just couldn't do it. The main problem is they took an idea, which was a great idea, and they just sort of fucked it up factually from the beginning, and I just couldn't get my fucking brain to operate with that. You know, if you really want to get a closer show, watch Gomorrah. That is very, very close. For me to honestly enjoy anything crime related, It has to come with a shitload of facts. It doesn't matter to me if they bend this here, bend this there. But if you totally fucked the dog from the opening gate, then I cannot buy anything else that you tell me. An example would be The Godfather of Harlem. Talk about a shit show. And it's nothing but false facts on that. You really think anybody was going to tell Vinny the Chin to go fuck himself? Get real. These guys so desperately, and this is not a racist thing, it's just reality. They want to make African-American numbers runners and drug dealers like John Gotti and Al Capone, and they weren't. They were always subservient to the mafia. And like I said, before you attempt to like claim that I'm being racist, that's really not what I'm saying. They have their own place in history, like Frank Matthews and others, but people like to distort the reality of who these guys really were. Look, Nicky Barnes is a hero to like a lot of people. He was a fucking rat. Frank Lucas, big hero to a lot of people. He's a fucking rat. They never seem to mention that. It's always, oh, they made all this money. They did this, they did that. Nicky Barnes got his narcotics from the mob. Same shit happened to Frank Lucas. So the point I'm making to you is that people will distort history and facts because, to be honest, means that somehow they're not exactly the legends that they tried to make themselves out to be, and that's just reality. All right. Just wondering, do you have a favorite quote from any mobster? I think probably Carlos Marcello. I think he said two can keep a secret if one is dead, but I actually don't think he said that. I think there was a sign on his office wall that said that. And to be honest with you, it's not what mobsters say necessarily that's inspiring to me. It's what they don't say. I think people would be relatively surprised by the great advice that mob guys can give you. Listen, that's not to say that any better or worse than normal people, but I found that they traditionally emphasize being very blunt and honest when giving advice. And you can tell over the years that they have been given advice by other men from a different era. I know somebody specifically who gives me advice like a brother. And he's always right. He's always on the money. It's a little annoying, but he's always right. Advice is always free until you stop taking it. And then that's when it costs you dearly. All right. Why do some of the smaller crime families go defunct or inactive? For example, the one in Dallas or areas like that. It all comes down to politics. They cannot keep feeding local politicians. And they end up losing the ability to control the unions. Any city can have the mafia in it, but the problem is if you aren't strong and if you can't bribe or make the politicians bend at the knees in some capacity and you can't come across strong-willed versus the mayor or city council or police chiefs, forget it. The smaller states which have survived, often when you look back in the early days, it was because they controlled politics, they controlled bribes, corruption was key. You have to be strong. You've got to set the tone. You've got to be willing to be violent as fuck. That's just the reality. Who would reign better in this day and age, Bugsy Siegel or Meyer Lansky? Probably Lansky because he could earn serious money. And in this climate, trust me, I think Meyer Lansky would be able to find ways around a lot of the new laws. And I think, look, in an era where it's about money and not necessarily bloodshed, I just think that Lansky would be better suited for these days. Is Mickey Featherstone still alive? Absolutely, to my knowledge, he is. Did Castellano really call off the hit on Donnie Brasco? I don't know if he did or not, but that was at least the rumor, according to Joe Pistone. Castellano, I know, did tell the Bonanos that they couldn't touch him under any circumstance. We're never really going to know. We weren't there, but it seems like something Castellano probably likely would have done because you just didn't hit agents, you didn't hit cops. It would have just created too much. All right, I'm thinking of starting a T-shirt company featuring famous mobsters. Who are some of the people you would like to see on the shirts? Roy DeMeo, Albert Anastasia, Carlo Gambino, Nicky Scarfo, Joey Merlino, Vinny Gigante, and Jimmy Burke. All right. Would you describe Whitey Bulger as a rat? After all, he seems to have taken the FBI for a complete ride and then had them, or more specifically, some of their agents working for and covering for him. Does it appear to have been a one-way flow of information from the FBI to Whitey? Oh boy, this is something that is going to take a little time for me to answer. So let me do this. Let me take a break, and when I come back, I will answer this to the best of my ability. Stay tuned on Mob Talk Radio. All right, so we're back. And you know what? I should probably, I really shouldn't do this, but I'm going to. You probably heard my phone going off in the background. And the reason why I took a break right then and there is obviously I got to talk about this Whitey Bulger thing a little bit in depth, but I just got a text that somebody's reporting that I got thrown out of a place in South Philly. They mentioned a fucking name of somebody who threw me out of a place in South Philly. And I can tell you this, it's bullshit. It's not even true. Just more lies from a bunch of jerk-offs that don't have anything better to do. And go ahead, keep up talking about the people you don't fucking know. Because that's, you know, it's a dumb thing to fucking do, to mention people's names and make up lies and say this happened, that happened, because it's a rap move. It's stupid. It's dumb. I don't understand why anybody does it. And I'm not going to give any validity to it. I'm just going to tell you that just, these people are just fucking ridiculous. I've never been thrown out anywhere in Philly in my life. Please. If I was so fucking hated by the people you're going to fucking mention, I couldn't even walk into any place in South Philly. Are you kidding me? So knock it the fuck off. Just take a fucking Quaalude or something, you fucking delusional fucks. All right, so the question was, would you describe Whitey Bulger as a rat? After all, it seems he seems to have taken the FBI for a complete ride and had them remorse, specifically some of their agents working for and covering for him. Does it appear to have been a one-way flow of information from the FBI to Whitey? So here's the thing. If you can find it, type in the United States of America versus Whitey Bulger, and you're going to hear a lot of things that are very interesting. Look, did Whitey Bulger give up information on people? Sure, absolutely. Does that make him a rat? Yes, absolutely. However, we got to talk about 302s. If you don't know what a 302 is, anytime you sit down with the federal government and you're sort of giving up information, then memorialize it in a 302. Okay. And typically, guys that are giving up a lot of information, especially if they're high-profile guys, their 302s are massive. I mean, fucking massive. And in the case of Whitey Bulger, his 302s were very thin. And what I mean by thin is, if Whitey Bulger has given up people for 10 years, there should be like fucking 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 pages. And a lot of these 302s that John Connolly, disgraced piece of shit FBI agent that he was, you know, a lot of the information that Whitey Bulger was just regurgitated nonsense. And I'm not validating and saying that Whitey Bulger didn't talk, because he did. But I'll give you an example. I believe in one of the 302s, Whitey Bulger says, made contact with this person, talked about this. And it's like one sentence. And John Connolly repeats this in thousands of pages. So was John Connolly protecting Whitey Bulger? Absolutely, 100%. Did he give Whitey Bulger information that led to people getting murdered? Absolutely. And that's why John Connolly is sitting his ass in a fucking Florida prison for the rest of his fucking life, even though I think he does come up for parole next year. And he is trying to get out because of COVID-19. But was he a rat? Absolutely. But did he take the FBI for a ride? Absolutely. But in the streets, you know, it's just the streets have a different code and a different rule set. If you sit down with the police and you give them information on other people, that makes you a rat. You don't necessarily have to testify against anybody. Just the fact that you're giving up information on your friends to sort of get yourself out of a jam, you know, makes you a rat as far as what the streets say. But, you know, Whitey Bulger's case is very interesting. And in watching the United States of America versus Whitey Bulger, you know, I tried to keep an open mind. And I think there's a lot of things that are subject to interpretation. And I think Whitey Bulger made a lot of good arguments for some things that the feds were alleging. But also there was a mass cover-up and a mass corruption with this. because John Connolly sort of insulated Whitey Bulger, and there is an argument to be made that John Connolly made up a lot of shit that never happened. So listen, I'm not the judge, the jury, or the executioner in this case, but Whitey Bulger was a rat. I mean, I don't think that there's any way that you can argue your way out of that. Do I think that this story is bigger than a lot of people suspect? Sure, absolutely. Just like, Whitey Bulger gets whacked in prison. He had only been transferred to Hazleton for like a day before he's killed. No footage of fucking the murder takes place. And I think a lot of that is because Whitey Bulger made the FBI look very, very bad in a lot of different ways. And a lot of people had an axe to grind. But is he a rat? Yeah, absolutely, unequivocally. But listen, if you get a chance to watch it, the United States of America versus Whitey Bulger, it's a very interesting watch. All right. Can you explain? Okay, let's pass this one. Do you agree our neighborhoods are much safer with organized crime? Federal Hill was safe in the 80s. Rest in peace, Raymond Patriarca and Uncle Rudy. Yeah, I can listen. I can tell you this about Providence. And these were stories that my mother told me, because she grew up her whole life in Providence, is that you could not throw a cigarette butt on the street. If you did, somebody would come and say something to you. She would walk to school every day, and the guys in the corner in the nice suits would give them money to say novenas at church and stuff like that. Specifically in Providence, if you were not recognized, the phone would ring at Ray Patriarca's office, and he would be told. The older ladies would keep an eye out and protect him and insulate him. And I think that the neighborhoods were safer. They pushed the drug dealers out, and I'm not saying they didn't sell drugs, because they did. But they would push the drug dealers out of the neighborhood because they didn't want that shit in the neighborhood, and they took care of their own. And so, yeah, I think neighborhoods were much safer with organized crime controlling the neighborhoods. There are going to be moralists who will argue that, they shook down their own people, this shit and that shit. But at the end of the day, you had people you could go to without calling the cops. That's the way that the mob was. And I think neighborhoods were better. All right. Did the federal government go after finances of families of jailed mobsters? Absolutely 100%. An example, obviously, like this person mentions, is Gas Pipe Casso went to jail. The IRS tried to take money and essentially forced him to sort of make a deal, because they said, listen, if we can't get you, we're going to take your money from your wife, your kids, and etc. They sort of pulled the same shit with Vinny the Chin Gigante when he was doing the I'm crazy, batshit crazy, dirty bathrobe act. Is what they finally got him, and when they finally put pressure on him, they said, look, we're going to go after your secret family, which was he had two wives, Neha Olympia. One was his wife, one was his mistress. He had kids with both. He says, we're going to go after them, and we're going to bankrupt them. We're going to take all their money, and they're going to be in the poorhouse. And we're going to go after your children, and we're going to arrest them too. And that was finally enough for him to say, all right, you got me. I was playing this fucking game for 30 years. You got it. Because at the end of the day, that the feds will manipulate anything that they can, anything that they want, to try to get you to confess, and anything to put you in jail. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they use that against Gas Pipe, and they also use that against Vinny Gigante. So yeah, absolutely, they've done stuff like that. All right. Jeff, can you explain in detail how the purple dinosaur insulated himself so well? Once again, I marvel over this guy and how he does it. Listen, it's all about not being seen. It's all about only being heard by the people you need to be heard from and to. I think that there is a genuine idea that you don't have to be seen on the corner for people to fear you and to respect you. A lot of that is by your reputation and what you are willing to do, and in some cases, what you aren't willing to do. And I think anybody that's been able to stay under the radar, so to speak, isn't putting their ego ahead of the bottom line. And the bottom line is money and power. And I think guys that do that insulate themselves incredibly. All right. In a way, was The Sopranos modeled after Detroit? Two high-ranking brothers being street boss and capo, then one becomes the boss eventually. No, they were not based after Detroit whatsoever. They actually were based sort of over the Cavalcante crime family, and I think they probably mixed a little Philly in there and a little New York as well. All right. Jeff, I asked this before, but who is the strongest ruling boss from prison? Carmine Persico. Build a 10-second. Who was the biggest Grim Reaper of mobsters. Okay. Probably the strongest ruling boss from prison was Carmine Persico. All right. Who was the biggest grim reaper of mobsters? Who killed the most men? Again, I guess it would have to be either Rizzuto or Gaspipe. Yep, pretty much. I don't think there's any way around that. Roy DeMeo too. Don't forget. Roy DeMeo was a bit of a fucking nutcase. All right, let's see. Getting to the tail end here. Okay. All right. Who inducted Joey Merlino? Okay, we already answered that. We believe it was John Stanfa. By some accounts, okay. If Luciano stays in the United States after he was given a release after the war, what happens? And would it have made any huge impact on all the families going into the 1950s? I don't know how much of an impact it would have made, because I think Luciano definitely going away to prison gave Vito Genovese the full availability to do what he did, which was sort of drag Carlo Gambino into it, the hit on Anastasia. So really, that raises, it's a very excellent question, a very intelligent question, because if Luciano stays in the United States, maybe Genovese doesn't have the balls to do what he did. Maybe Gambino doesn't do what he does. Maybe Gambino sits back and just kind of watches. I think ultimately Genovese might have gone to war with Luciano, but I don't know if he would have had the balls to do it with Luciano inside the country. I think the fact that Luciano gets pushed out really sort of nullified any power that he had, and so we might have seen a big difference in the Genovese crime families. That's a man, that question's great question. All right, Donnie Brasco, how many crimes do you think Joe Pistone committed while he was undercover? Let's see. He further says, I'd say quite a few for the mob. To let you be an associate and go that deep, he must have been. Look, Pistone did a lot of stuff that he wasn't legally allowed or supposed to do. His excuse was that he was undercover, yet in every single fucking interview he's done after the fact, he's bragged about how he hit this one, he smacked that one, he robbed this one, he robbed that one. But because he was out of the FBI, it no longer mattered. How about Sonny Black? Sonny Black gets whacked because of Joe Pistone's actions, and he does nothing to stop it. The FBI only wants to stop a fucking murder when they think that they can turn somebody into a federal informant. Look, in my opinion, the FBI is culpable in Sonny Black's murder because they knew he was going to be killed. They fucking knew it. They knew what was going to happen, and they did nothing. I mean, call yourself a badge waiver, 1 minute, and then look away the other fucking minute, and then say whatever you want to say. But at the end of the day, Joe Pistone was a highly decorated FBI agent, but at the end of the day, I think he was playing a lot of sides, and the fact that he brags about this shit is just repulsive to me. Just fucking repulsive. All right, will Frankie Loke ever get out of jail? I was actually talking about this tonight. I was in Queens, rolling around with some people, and we actually talked about Frankie Loke because if you consider that Mikey Spinelli's getting out and he had a violent offense, well, Frankie Loke is 89 years old. He's got health issues. He's in there for a lot of charges and murder conspiracy related to some murders that John Gotti called for. So there's an argument to be made that the guy's 89 years old, he should get out. And I think if you're going to let Spinelli out, who fucking shot a woman 3 fucking times, if you're going to let him out, why can't you let Frankie Lucasio out? So I'm in favor of letting him out. I just don't think the government's going to do it because it's got the Gotti name attached to it. I hate to say it like that, but that's just the truth. All right. Okay, this is a Philadelphia question. I'm not going to touch this. Oh, God. Okay. So every once in a while, I do get these questions, and I really don't want to say this guy's name because it's just not, it's not fair. It's not right. And all right. So I'm going to read this question. Is Stevie Mazzone still involved in the Mafia in Philadelphia? First of all, let me just say this. Any allegations or assertions about this one and that one, everybody's in the Mafia in Philadelphia. You didn't know that? Everybody is. Everybody is. Even the girls. All the girls are in a mob too in South Philly. Look, anybody in the past 14 to 20 years that got arrested for what the government alleges is a Mafia crime, of course, people are still going to think that people are involved. But let's be honest about one thing. Being associated with it due to an indictment doesn't mean you're in it. That's number one. Number two, you got to remember the press is the one who invents this shit. The FBI is the one who invents this shit. And so, with all due respect to the person who asked the question, I don't think there's anything wrong with your question. I think it's a valid question. But what I do want to say is, just because somebody grew up with somebody, and there's assertions made about all of those people, doesn't mean that they are what you think they are. I can say with any hesitation that Stevie Mazzone is a great guy, nice guy, charming guy, smart guy, funny guy, a gentleman, a fucking gentleman, through and through, a gentleman. I have never in my life ever heard a nasty thing about him. I've never heard anybody make allegations about him other than the FBI and the fucking press. So while people want to assert names with titles and ranks and organized crime and all this shit, sometimes you need to step back and you need to look at the evidence. And the evidence will point that people always get, and I'll give you a better example of this. If I hang out with Joe Blow, all right, Joe Blow is a gangster and Joe Blow gets arrested. And because I'm friends with a guy my whole life, they want to try to drag me into it. Well, now I got a fucking moniker attached to my name. Now I look a certain kind of way. Now people are going to say this and backbite and say these horrible things about me. But the truth is that I may not be involved in anything. And it's because I am who I am, and I hang out with certain people that people will make assertions and associations. And so, like, listen, Stevie's a good guy. Good guy. And I just think that it's a shame that people are still harping on shit that's fucking 15 years old. And that's the reality. Listen, not everybody with an Italian last name is a gangster. Not everybody that has been accused of shit in the past is a gangster. Sometimes people are just gentlemen. And sometimes people are just respectful, and they deserve respect, not for any other reason than they're kind human beings. And that's really all I can say about that. I just... listen, you can listen to news reports and read newspaper articles all day long, but like my father always told me, today's fucking news is tomorrow's garbage. And that's just the truth. That's just the truth. And I'm not going to say nothing bad about that guy, because to me, the guy's fucking a gentleman, an absolute fucking gentleman, beyond gentleman. All right. Jeff, what are your opinions on Wild Bill Cotolo, and do you think that the Colombo family would have been? How do you think the Colombo family would have been had he taken control of the family? From a lot of people I have talked to, Wild Bill. Okay, so here's the thing about Wild Bill. Okay, I think that Carmine Persco thought that Wild Bill Cotolo was going to try to take over the family, and there's sort of some evidence that would suggest that he was trying a coup. And listen, not knocking Wild Bill. Everybody that I've talked to about him, not one person has said a negative word about him. Everybody has said that he was well respected, he was feared, and he was a stand-up guy. But like I said, the problem I think that there was that Persico really wasn't going to let anybody shine above him. He was not going to tolerate insubordination. But you also have to understand that information, a lot of it, that got back to Persico came from Greg Scarpa. He played both sides of the fucking coin. Meanwhile, he was an FBI agent. And so do I think that Wild Bill Cotolo getting killed was the right move? No, not at all. I mean, the guy wasn't a rat. The guy was a stand-up guy. He was a tough fucking guy. He was loyal to people. And do I agree with what happened to him? No, I don't. I don't think on any level you could make an argument with me that would give the foundation of making that right on any level. However, that being said, I can also take the other stance that if Persico is being told that this is what he's doing behind the scenes, there's a reaction to that. And should Persico have reached out to 10 different people and asked? Sure, absolutely. Did he do that? I probably would be willing to bet you he didn't. The Persicos have had a hold on that crime family for a long, long time. But I don't know. I was not there. And I don't want to disparage Bill Cotolo for any reason, because like I said, anybody that I've talked to that knew him, was friends with him, has had nothing but good things to say about that guy. And it's usually followed by a head shake with it's a fucking shame what happened to that guy. But, this is organized crime. This is what we do. And that's what they do. Not we. I don't know why the fuck I included myself in that. Freudian slip? What? No, not really. I just think that at the end of the day, I think that there's a lot of politics that are involved in organized crime. I think there are some bosses that want to keep a grip of a crime family regardless of what happens, and they're not always in their right mind. And I'm not saying that Carmine Persico was. I'm not validating what he did or what he didn't do or what he should have done. It was his call. He made the decision, and that's how it all went down. But I don't have any negative opinions on Wild Bill. None whatsoever. I didn't know the guy. God rest his soul. I think probably what happened to him was kind of fucked up. But I don't know the situation. I wasn't there. I don't know anything other than what I've been told by multiple different people, and a lot of people liked him. There were a couple that threw him under the bus, but, everything is politics. Everything is politics. So, with that being said, that is going to be all the questions that we're going to cover for today. I am going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about John No-No's Difronzo. Stay tuned on Mob Talk Radio.
Today's Mob Talk Radio episode is brought to you by the following sponsors. Scarf Inc. Pest Control Services. If you've got a pest, we'll whack them out.
And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. And we are going to be talking about John No-No's Difronzo. There is not a ton of information, believe it or not, out there. So what I've done is I've tried to compile as much accurate information as I can, and I believe I probably have, if I'm being honest about it, I probably have the closest amount of information I think you're going to be able to get. So, with all that being said, John Difronzo was born December 13th of 1928 in Capuzzo, Bari, and at least that's what we can somewhat ascertain, and you've got to pay attention. This is going to be a little bit dizzy to some extent, because there were some immigration issues when his family first came to the country. So I'm going to try to explain this as best I can, but I'm probably going to lose a couple of years. But anyway, there were some issues because John's father, Michael, came to the country in 1932, and he files as a single male. Meanwhile, back in Italy, he was already actually married and had other children, specifically Frank and John Difronzo. What Michael had done essentially is he came to this country and he filed as a single male, not saying he had any children or a wife or an etc. And at some point he goes back to Italy and he comes back with his wife Dolores, Frank and John, and he claims to immigration that he was married once he returned to Italy. And so when they come back over, they land in New York and they attempt to get naturalized in New York. So I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but to make it a little bit more simple, he basically comes to the U.S. to get naturalized. Then he goes back to Italy, gets his family, and then returns. When they come back, they try to get naturalized in New York, and they actually end up going to the West End of Chicago, and they file the correct naturalization paperwork. Michael then sort of feels that, I think his mindset was, let me bring my wife and my kids, and my odds of getting naturalization is going to be a little bit easier. But the problem with the naturalization paperwork is that there were different dates and facts surrounding his naturalization process. So it's convoluted at best. Eventually, the courts claimed that Michael was, in fact, not a citizen. On June 7th of 1932, district judge would cancel his status. And what they begin to do is sort of question Michael's moral character for lying on dates and information on the naturalization paperwork. And so as a result of it, Frank and John actually lose their citizenship as well. A third son would be born a few months later. They would name him Ralph, and that would be the only member of the family who technically would have American status for a brief, short period of time. They would add 3 more children, Rosalia, Joe, and Peter, and they would be born in Chicago. In 1936, Michael sort of felt the pressure of the government. They were trying to put them back to Italy, and he filed citizen papers again. which were denied. And then in 1944, he would apply for like a fourth time. And specifically when Frank and John were 16 and 17, respectively. And one of the arguments was that his son John had joined the United States Army. He was defending the country. And in 1947, John got his own citizenship because he had joined the war efforts. And so really the reality is it's really not known whether the rest of his family ever got the naturalization paperwork or not. So in the 1940s, Michael begins to work as a candy maker, and they settle at the village of Stone Park off 38th Avenue in Illinois. John's first foray into criminality comes in the late 40s as he joins a group of ragtag burglary gang who dubbed themselves the 3-Minute Gang. And one of the reasons why they called themselves that was not only could they get in and out of a building very quickly, but it was also the standard practice of time before the police would arrive once an alarm went. And so, they were very well known for breaking and entering, very well known for getting away with stuff. But the gang didn't have its problems. Obviously, is John Difronzo would be busted in 1946, 1949, and in 1950. The 3-Minute Gang was really different in comparison with other gangs of the time. And this is what I mean. Back in those days, there really wasn't a lot of surveillance and stuff like that. Obviously, there weren't cameras in every corner. But what this group actually did was they surveilled the places that they were going to rob. They knew the ins and outs of the building. They knew the schematics. They knew the people that worked. They knew what was inside the building. They knew what they could move and sell. So the idea here is that if they know they're breaking into a fur manufacturer, they know the layout of the building. They know who's working. They know the security. They know what time the cops are coming to do shift changes in the neighborhood. And they also know who they can fence the goods to, and they fence the goods before they even steal them. And a lot of that is innovative because this is just not something that people did in those days. I'm sure there were some bank robbers like Willie Sutton and Dillinger and some of these other people that did that kind of stuff. But this is really innovative, to be perfectly honest with you. So this is what made them good at what they did. They could get in quickly. They could get exactly what they wanted to move. And it enabled them to really just not have a lot of risk. And that's the thing. Anytime you can mitigate risk, then you're going to win. So in 1949, John and his crew were busting into a clothing factory. The name of that factory was the Faye Manning Garment Shop. It was on 304 North Michigan Ave. And gunshots actually get exchanged with police. One report stated that Difronzo initiated the fight by shooting at the officers with a .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol. Another report sort of states that Difronzo was on the receiving end of a shotgun blast and revolver fire after he shined a flashlight at 3 police officers who were coming after them. And also, it's been alleged because he gets the nickname No Nose for a couple of different reasons, and there's mainly 2. Allegedly, one of them is that he leapt out of a window and the window cut off the edge of his nose as he was trying to get away from the police. Ultimately, he would be arrested, but not before the police give him actually the tip of his nose back, which would be surgically fixed. He would end up going to prison on that charge for 2 years. And that's really what I believe in how he got the nickname No Nose, to be honest with you. But some have claimed that Difronzo actually took a shotgun blast to the face, and that's what blew his nose off. So you got 2 differing reports. But Difronzo and his accomplice were taken to Bridewell Hospital in critical condition, both having gunshots to the face and abdomen. Once John Difronzo was healed, he goes right to prison for those crimes. So as a result of that certain event, the 3-Minute Men pretty much dissolve as a crew. And they had gotten away with over $100,000 in stolen merchandise over a relatively short period of time. The problem is that John Difronzo didn't have a single fucking desire to go straight whatsoever. He wasn't done with crime. He wasn't done boosting stuff. And so once he gets out of prison, he goes right back into the burglary business with a guy by the name of Paul Peanuts Pansko. And so while that's happening, there's something that is going on in the background as far as the mob in Chicago. The Chicago outfit at that time, it's right around, it's sort of a transition in the 1950s. Obviously, Paul Ricca and Anthony Accardo had sort of been put in place, and that was designed for when Al Capone went off to prison in 1932. Shortly after that, obviously Frank Nitti allegedly kills himself, which I've always doubted because it's kind of hard to kill yourself by shooting yourself in the back of the fucking head like multiple times. So I have never bought that Frank Nitti killed himself. Frank Nitti was a fucking mental case, absolutely. But ultimately, with Frank Nitti killing himself, that sort of gives way to Sam Giancana. So we sort of know how this all develops. Now, as far as Paul Ricca and Anthony Accardo, I have always technically believed that Giancana was sort of a front boss and that Paul Ricca and Anthony Accardo really were splitting duties and sort of leading Giancana as to what he needed to do. I've never really believed for 1 second that Sam Giancana was the head of the outfit in that perspective. So in 1961, John Difronzo gets sort of overshadowed by his brother Peter, who really was a gangster through and through. And what ended up happening was the FBI had arrested Peter in that May of 1961. And what happened was the Fed spotted a high-end tractor trailer positioned in an area it really shouldn't have been, and they sort of move in to get a closer look. And Peter, who was sitting in the driver's seat at the time, sort of catches them and jumps out and takes off on foot. He would eventually be caught half a mile away off North Mannheim Road. And so they drag Peter back to the scene. They crack open the truck, and to everybody's surprise, hooray, hooray, they find that inside the back of the truck, which they thought was like stolen cars and stuff like that, they see thousands and thousands of boxes of cigarettes and razors and other things. And it turns out that those boxes were a part of an armed robbery which took place earlier at a grocery warehouse in Illinois. Cops had been tipped off that Chicago and Wisconsin were the direct points of contact for the distribution of the stolen goods. So it was bad news. Both the state and federal authorities get involved, and they hand down an indictment in 1962, which names Peter the head, along with 6 others, in a massive conspiracy charge to move stolen cigarettes, razors, and hosiery. And sort of in a weird, fucking strange move that I haven't really been able to nail down. I really tried my hardest to try to find out why they dropped charges on certain guys. I mean, yeah, it could cause you to speculate that somebody talked. But what they ended up doing is reducing the indictment from 6 men to 4. And the 4 that were indicted were Peter Difronzo, Anthony Dodino, Meadow Calzavara, and John Torello. 3 of the 4 would be convicted and sentenced to long bids in federal prison. The only one who walks from that crime is John Torello. The following month, John Difronzo finally makes headlines. Law enforcement at the time was investigating a West Side loan sharking gang, and they were following really a severe beating of a slow-paying debtor, and they also were able to sort of acquire information, obviously from somebody talking, that John Difronzo and his little crew of loan sharks were meeting with Chicago outfit mob leadership. And there was a factory worker by the name of Joseph Weisfall, and he pretty much is the rat in this position. And in this case, he ends up alerting the police to the gang after a July 1963 series of beatings that left him with broken teeth, fractured ribs, and head injuries. Weisfall's offense against the gang was pretty much refusing to make his tribute payments. He was borrowing money. He was paying, I believe he borrowed $2,000 and he was paying 25% interest payments on that $22,000, which is fucking insane. Conversely, if we look at today's thing, loan sharking rates typically here in New York are anywhere from 6 to 9%, just depending on the amount of money you borrow. The more money you borrow, sometimes the percentage is lower. The less you borrow, the percentage is higher. But I know for a fact it's going from 6 to 9% here. So 25% is fucking outrageous, especially on a $2,000 loan. But if you're going to loan shark, you got to make his money back. That's how you do it. So basically, Weisfall just was getting way behind on his fucking payments. And he gets scared, so he runs to the cops, and the cops put him in protective custody while they're working the case against John Difronzo and his crew. Difronzo, who was 35 at the time, was found to be the lead collector and enforcer of that gang. Joseph Gagliano, 49. Joey the Clown Lombardo, who was 33 at the time, was also a member. And investigators actually found out that the gang met on March 9th of 1961 with Willie Potatoes Dodano, who at that time was sort of the head of the Chicago mob's rackets in Kane, DuPage, and McHenry counties. Dodano suggested that they expand their influence by taking loan sharking profits and putting them into legitimate businesses, which would have been a smart move. If you're going to loan shark from like 10 fucking storefronts, take it and then invest in a factory. This way they could clean the money, and it's just money laundering on a different scale. But that's basically what law enforcement was able to find out. Then they find out that on August 4th of 61, Dodano meets with Mad Sam DiStefano. And at the time, Stefano had his own sort of loan sharking operation going on in Northwest Chicago. Charges would be brought against pretty much everybody in December of 1963, and John Difronzo would be specifically accused of being one of those who kidnapped, threatened, and tortured Weisfall. Gagliano's group was completely sort of like Jerry Springer-like at the court hearing. They refused to cooperate. They refused to give any information. They refused to answer questions. They refused to even be fingerprinted. And this was sort of the mojo of the mob back in the day. You don't admit anything. You don't say anything. You don't talk about anything. You don't act compliant in any stretch of the fucking imagination. And so they even went as far as to cover their faces when journalists tried to take their photos, and really they were going to stay hard line with that. They were not going to give them an edge, but they sort of relented a little bit because the judge had pretty much said, "Listen, I am not even going to have a bail hearing until you guys fucking agree to at least let us process you, let us fingerprint you," and ultimately. They finally acquiesced to what the judge wanted, and so 6 defendants were brought to trial in March of 1964 for kidnapping and beating Weisfall. Joe Gagliano, John Difronzo, Joey the Clown Lombardo, and Wee Willie Massino, and 2 former policemen, Albert Sarno and Chris Carty, who were involved in the loan sharking operations. They were protecting the racket. They were cracking people. So they were bad cops on Team Mafia. All right. So what ends up happening is there's a mistrial that happens, specifically that case, in April of that year, as authorities really they find out that these cops, Albert Sarno and Chris Carty, used their law enforcement brotherhood to sort of grab other police officers who probably were, I'm not going to say legitimate. And what they do is there's somebody that's tossed around and through Sarno and Carty on behalf of the mob, and they hire a cop to basically go and try to shake down jurors, and that's what happens. And obviously the judge and the courts find out about this, and so there's a mistrial. In May, the case gets brought back to court, and Joey Lombardo gets released because Weisfall could not identify him as the man who beat him. I think that's likely because Joey the Clown Lombardo was no fucking joke. He was not somebody you wanted to fuck with on any goddamn level. And I think Weisfall just sort of pissed his pants at the idea that he was going to rat out Joey the Clown. And what Weisfall actually tells the jury is that he was taken against his will to the basement of a bar in Elmwood Park. He was handcuffed to a ceiling pipe, and then the men that he's named really beat the shit out of him with pipes, kicked him, bashed his head in, etc. But the problem is that his testimony was so fucking shaky that the jury found him not to be very convincing. They found him not to be very valid, and a lot of that was his inconsistencies in the case. He didn't tell the same story more than once. He kept changing facts, he kept changing the parameters, and that caused a lot of problem with the prosecution's case. So after 7 days, the jury then begins to deliberate, and 3.5 hours later, they acquit every single person named in that indictment. So the other thing that we have going on while this is taking place is that Sam Giancana sort of becomes the at least the front face of the outfit, and specifically we have to talk about the mid-'60s because we're going to start to have some problems. Giancana's links to the Kennedy administration, to the CIA, and obviously it's the effort for the mob and the government to act complicit in killing Castro. It starts to gain a lot of publicity. And one of the things that Giancana does that we really haven't talked a lot about on my show before is that he filed a fucking lawsuit against the FBI to try to get them to stop surveilling him. He ends up getting jailed in 1965 for contempt of court and for refusing to testify before a grand jury that had given him fucking immunity. When he was released, he fled the country for Mexico. And so now there's a problem. Giancana takes off, and so Accardo and Rica sort of have to put the broken shells back together of what's left of the outfit. And you know, it's, you know, and the thing is that Accardo and Rico were not young guys at this time. They were about 70 years old at this point. The thing is that, you know, specifically Paul Rica never lived long enough to see what would happen with Giancana, because Rico would pass away in 1972. So top outfit leaders at the time, Felix Aldericio and Sam Battaglia, they also pass away in the 1970s. So Accardo then sort of, you know, sort of in his own way, he really does take over. Accardo does, and he sort of puts up a front boss, you know, system, and Joe Aiuppa really would be sort of become the face, even though behind the scenes, you know, Accardo is sort of pushing this. So in 1975, Sam Giancana makes the mistake of coming back to Chicago. A Senate committee immediately makes plans to drag his ass in court, and they want to fucking question him and grill him about the CIA and the connection to kill Castro. But before that can happen, they whacked Sam Giancana. He had to go. So in the 1980s, pretty much Anthony Accardo sort of puts himself into retirement, and Joe Aiuppa was taken out of Chicago in 1986 when he, along with Jackie Cerrone, Joey Lombardo, and Angelo LaPietro of Chicago, and Milton Rockman of Cleveland, get a long prison sentence for skimming money from Las Vegas casinos. So the exit of Accardo and Joe Aiuppa led to the brief reign of Joe Ferriola. Ferriola, really, at the end of the day, had good leadership potential. He was a guy who served as a sort of a baseball batter under Sam Giancana. He supervised gambling operations in Northern Cook, Lake County, and McHenry County. And he had a lot of experience in legitimate enterprises. He knew how to take money that was illegal and run it into a legitimate company. Specifically, he owned a sanitation company, and he owned several dry cleaning businesses, which were a long, long success. And a lot of people thought at the time, this is going to be the guy who really is going to take the Chicago outfit, you know, for the next 30 years, because he was in his late 50s at the time. But he also had legal issues of his own, as the FBI and the IRS were investigating him, and he had serious health problems. And as soon as he sort of takes charge, he begins to rely on Samuel Carlisi, who was a Joe Aiuppa friend and a longtime manager of Cicero gambling rackets, and he brings him in to help him run the outfit. Then Ferriola kind of fucks up, and he creates a problem for the mob when he doubled the protection tax for independent bookmaking operations in the Chicago area, which not only affected the mob in general, but it pissed off a lot of people. So a number of those bookmakers refused to pay the tax. They threatened both mob guys and about going to the cops and etc. And it just really created a lot of problems. So in the fall of 1988, a lot of people, at least on the streets, at least the sort of talk on the streets was that Ferriola, you know, had really just sort of not left the mob, but he just kind of stepped aside, and that Carlisi actually had taken over as being sort of the boss day to day, like a front boss or a street boss. He was handling the day-to-day operations. And so what ends up happening is law enforcement starts to really look at what the leadership is, who's actually the leader. And in 1989, Ferriola dies at Methodist Hospital in Houston following a heart surgery, and they believe at that time is when John Difronzo took over as boss of the Chicago outfit. At that time, you know, Difronzo was playing the game of, you know, I just own car dealerships. I'm not really anybody, but people that we're talking to, law enforcement, were telling law enforcement that John Difronzo had taken over a lot of the rackets, taken control of almost every single racket in Chicago and outside of Chicago weeks before Ferriola died. So the assumption is made that Ferriola and John Difronzo met, and Ferriola handed everything over to John Difronzo. You know, Difronzo would end up trying to keep a low profile, which would have been completely the opposite of Ferriola, who, you know, couldn't really. Ferriola was the type of guy that once he became boss, he built like a fucking mansion in Oak Park. and it just created a lot of, I don't want to say the John Gotti effect, because John Gotti never really bought a huge house like that, but sort of a Paul Castellano effect, I think, is a better sort of assertion with that. But Difronzo wasn't that kind of guy. He lived with his wife. He stayed in an apartment in the village of River Grove, and he just sort of kept a low profile. But he also sort of finds out that, you can't be the boss of the Chicago Mafia and keep a low profile. It's just not going to happen no matter what you do. So a federal indictment comes down on January 10th of 1992 and charges John Difronzo and Samuel Carlisi and 8 others with conspiring to gain control of gambling at a proposed casino in the Rincon Indian Reservation in California's San Diego County. That indictment was basically charged defendants with racketeering, extortion, mail fraud, wire fraud. It was based upon a lot of wiretaps. The extortion pretty much came from the mob's efforts to extort $250,000 from 5 men who owned loan shark debts to Tony Spilatro. Difronzo then, at the time, who was 63, his co-defendant would have been Michael Karachi, who was 53 of Bensonville. They get arrested in Chicago. They get processed, and eventually they get out on bond. At the time, 70-year-old Carlisi was arrested at his Weston, Florida home as he was heading out for a round of golf. The list of defendants also included Underworld associate Chris Petty and San Diego attorney Nicky DePinto, and they would all face trial in San Diego. Now, according to prosecutors at the time, the outfit had gone through Petty and sort of made several offers to the Rincon tribe to try to obtain a contract to operate a planned casino and bingo parlor on the reservation. So more or less, they go to them and say, look, we're going to give you all this money. You guys get the contracts to get the casinos, but we're going to secretly run them and you're going to pay us back. And the mob guys, I'm assuming Difronzo and these other guys, they basically said that, we'll come up with the money, don't worry about it. And so what they started doing was withdrawing, a lot of money from other places. And there was something else going on at the same time down in Baltimore. It was sort of the same setup, and it was losing a lot of money in Baltimore. And so what Petty does is he goes in search of other investors and really doesn't find what he's looking for, but eventually he does. And the problem is that it ends up being an undercover federal agent who was pretending to be a money launderer of a cocaine Colombian drug dealer. And so while Difronzo is waiting for his federal trial to begin in San Diego, he gets called before a federal grand jury in the Dirksen Federal Building in Chicago. The jury was basically investigating a series of bombings apparently related to the Chicago outfit. Initially, it was just a response to the May 17th, 1992 car bombing that seemed to be designed to intimidate former gangster Leonard Patrick. But the probe really gets bigger, and it expands into the June 24th, 1981 bombing that killed trucking firm executive Michael Cagoni, and then the September 6th, 1990 bombing that targeted but did not kill Teamsters official Lucian Sinesi. Other witnesses get called before the grand jury, and they include Marco D'Amico, who just recently passed away, Jola Mantia, Anthony Dote, Sam Carlisi, Joseph Andracci, Frank Calabrese, James Marcello, and Anthony Zizzo. And what ends up happening there is right around May 27th of 1992, Anthony Accardo dies. And that sort of happens right as the grand jury investigation sort of began. And then a year later, a federal jury in San Diego convicted John Difronzo and Donald Angelini of conspiracy and fraud in connection with the Rincon casino proposal. They both received 37 months in federal prison. Angelini also faced sentencing on a fraud conviction related to bingo gaming in Baltimore. And then on appeal, Difronzo managed somehow to get his sentence reduced to 16 months. He would be released from prison in 1994. So while Joey Lombardo is also at the same time behind bars, at the time, he gets released, I believe, shortly after that. And a lot of people thought that at the time that Joey the Clown Lombardo was going to sort of jockey himself into position to take John Difronzo out of leadership, not by killing him, just sort of a takeover of I'm going to be the boss. And the problem is the local newspapers picked up on that. And they used the headline of federal authorities say Joey Lombardo is an odds-on favorite to move up again, perhaps succeeding Anthony Accardo, the late boss of organized crime in Chicago. That obviously was probably filtered to the press through the FBI because they do this kind of stuff all the time. They like to drive a narrative because they know it creates friction behind the scenes. And a lot of FBI experts were suggesting at the time that Joey Lombardo, if there was a power struggle between John Difronzo or Sam Carlisi, that Lombardo would not have a problem taking over. But the problem is that there really was not any power struggle at all. It was bullshit planted by the FBI, and John Difronzo pretty much kept control of the family. So by 1997, the Chicago Crime Commission asserted, at least publicly, that John Difronzo was the boss of the Chicago outfit and that Joey Lombardo and Angelo La Pietra were serving basically as underboss and consigliere. There were reports even that John Difronzo's brother Peter had sort of moved up the ladder and sort of was acting in a consigliere type of position. And so what happens at this point is that the government is really pissed. So they start looking at IRS stuff and all kinds of stuff. And what they end up doing is the government gets the IRS involved, and the IRS sort of looks at defense attorney fees were claimed, at least on Difronzo's taxes, as a business expense, which is kind of funny to me. But Difronzo ends up getting really lucky here because a court judge actually agrees with him. I don't know how you could put defense attorneys' fees down as a fucking business expense. But for anybody listening out there, if you're involved in organized crime, this worked in 1997 in Chicago, so you might want to try this too, especially if the IRS comes after you. Arnold Rahm, who was the boss, ruled that the business expense was legitimate, even if the business was not legitimate. He said that Difronzo's criminal convictions sufficed as proof of his line of work. At the time, experts said that there were limits to underworld deductions. Firearms and bullets probably would not be allowed on business expenses, they would say. You imagine? That's a great argument. So anyway, federal investigators really start looking hard at Difronzo and Alphonse Tornabene when they launched Operation Family Secrets trial at the end of the 1990s, benefiting from the cooperation of that rat piece of shit Nick Calabrese, the son of longtime big shot Frank Calabrese. The FBI was able to assemble evidence of mob murders, loan sharking, gambling, narcotics trafficking, conspiracy, RICO, blah, 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 all the typical crimes they usually indict people for. However, in this particular case, Difronzo and Tornabene were not included on the list of defendants when the Family Secrets trial case came together in the early 2000s. Pretty much everybody who was somebody in Chicago got indicted in that. John Difronzo didn't, and Alphonse Tornabene didn't, which has led people to say that they think that John Difronzo was a rat. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. The problem is that nobody gave Difronzo up. And what furthers the idea that Nick Calabrese was lying was that why would you not indict the boss? You're going to indict your fucking father, Frank. You're going to indict everybody else and their fucking mother. So why not fucking indict Difronzo? And the point was that they didn't have anything on Difronzo, and that's why Difronzo was never ever indicted for those crimes. It's not because it was not for a lack of trying. Believe me, it wasn't for a lack of trying. They just couldn't get shit on him. There were 14 defendants in this case, including Joey the Clown Lombardo, James Marcello, Michael Marcello, Frank Calabrese, Nick Calabrese, Paul the Indian Shiro, and Frank the German Schweiss. A number of defendants in that sort of indictment reached plea deals before 2007 because they realized they were fucked. Schweiss was severed from the trial due to his poor health, and he would die in 2008. as far as some of the things that Nick Calabrese did say, he said that he testified in '86 about the murders of Anthony and obviously Tony Spilatro and Michael Spilatro, and he stated that John Difronzo literally took part in those murders along with James Marcello and beating the brothers to death and putting them out in the farm fields. But no charges related to those murders were brought against Difronzo, and that's a little bit strange to me. That is the one thing that I think a lot of cherry pickers who like to call Difronzo a rat use. Well, you have Nick Calabrese saying that John Difronzo took part in the murder and beatings of Anthony and Michael Spilatro, but yet he doesn't get charged with any of that. So I don't know why that is. I really don't know why that is. And that could lead us down a rabbit trail of a bunch of things, but I will come back to that in 1 second. Then in September of 2007, a jury found the 5 remaining family secrets defendants, who was James Marcello, Frank Calabrese, Joey Lombardo, Paul Shiro, and former police officer Anthony Doyle guilty on all charges. Later that month, the same jury also found Calabrese, Marcello, and Lombardo guilty of racketeering murders dating back to 1970. Sentencing would happen in 2009. Calabrese, Marcello, and Lombardo are sentenced to life in prison. Shiro was sentenced to 20 years, and Doyle was sentenced to 12 years, respectively. Rather than, I think the feds thought that this would remove Difronzo from power. What the Family Secrets trial really did was it ended up giving Difronzo really sort of a security wall. There was a lot of speculation at the time that the Marcello wing of the outfit was a threat to Difronzo's status. James Marcello was actually sent away for life through the Family Secrets trial, largely because of his involvement in the same killings that were attributed but not charged to Difronzo. So there's another little tidbit there that sort of makes you kind of scratch your head a little bit. Why did one guy who was involved with Difronzo in those murders go away for the rest of his life, but Difronzo doesn't take the charge? Marcello's brother Michael, who reached a Family Secrets plea deal, was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. Difronzo, early in 2009, was pretty much named the undisputed mob boss of Chicago. He was still living in his River Grove apartment. Difronzo was said to make regular drives in his pickup truck to a local restaurant, which was called the Loon Cafe on Thatcher Avenue, where he would meet with Peter, his brother, and Marco D'Amico, who sadly passed away, and other underworld figures. In March of that year, reporters from ABC7 in Chicago intruded. Basically, they walked in on Difronzo having a fucking meeting in this luncheonette. And Difronzo was polite, but just didn't really want to say shit. And then in the spring of 2010, the Loon's Nest, or what the fuck, the Loon was actually closed down. And so as Difronzo gets a little bit older, his effectiveness as a leader just sort of waned. Just that Family Secrets trial really ripped a hole in Chicago fucking mile wide. But one of the things that Difronzo did, and what he was able to do, is he didn't really ever do like serious time. He got away pretty much with everything. He avoided lengthy prison terms, where others in that group didn't. But sadly, John Difronzo couldn't escape the Grim Reaper, because sadly, John Difronzo would die on May 27th of 2018 at 89 years old. And that's sort of his life, and it is, I know I was kind of all over the place with it, but the one thing I want to talk about before we close out today's show is that we have to ask ourselves a very, very interesting question. How is it that John Difronzo, who is the alleged boss of the Chicago outfit at that time, get indicted in murders, or not even, he doesn't even really get indicted, so to speak. Everybody around him gets indicted. There were co-conspirators in those murders that were indicted and ended up with life sentences. But for some reason, John Difronzo does not get pinched. He doesn't even take a charge in that. And to me, that's a little bit fucking weird. I got to admit to you, that's a little fucking weird. You look at the Family Secrets trial, and Nick Calabrese fucking buried everybody. But he doesn't bury Difronzo. And that, to me, is a little fucking strange, too. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, when we talk about these criminal trials, using Salvatore Samuel Bull Gravano for a minute, that fucking scumbag jerk-off fuck, baldy-headed lizard-looking bitch, fucking dog John Gotti. The government's target was John Gotti. In this case, with Nick Calabrese, the target was the hierarchy of the Chicago outfit. Yet John Difronzo, for whatever reason, gets away with it. And that is what leads to a lot of people asking me, how did you think John Difronzo was a rat? Because everybody around him got pinched but him. And that's a weird thing. I got to admit, that's a weird fucking thing. If you were named as one of the co-conspirators to murder Anthony and Michael Spilatro, and yet people that committed the murder with you go to jail and you're not even charged, it's a little suspect to me. Like I said, I'm not saying the guy's a rat. I'm just saying that I'm an odds guy, and I like to play the odds. I don't believe in coincidence, and I don't believe in fucking circumstance. And I'll use an example to really narrow it down. Let's take me and 3 other fucking people, all right? All 3 of us, or let's take 5, me and 5 other guys, there's 6 of us. We all take place in bank robberies and murders and all this kind of shit, and every single one of them gets arrested, including me. One of them turns rat and rats everybody out, and I'm the only one that's never touched. I'm the only one that's never indicted. I'm the only one that doesn't go away. That's a little circumspect to me. That's a little, strange. And like I said, it lends itself to conspiracy theories out of people that John Difronzo was paying the FBI or John Difronzo was giving them information on people. Because I find it incredibly listen, it's no fucking matter of luck or happenstance that everybody around you, a guy that stood next to you and beat in fucking Anthony Spilatro's fucking brains in with a bat, and his brother Michael, you beat his brains in with a fucking bat. A guy testifies that he knows you and you did it, but everybody else gets fucking pinched for it, goes and does life in prison, but you don't. You walk from it. So here's what I'm going to say about that. Either there was not enough evidence to back up and refute those claims. In other words, meaning Nick Calabrese might have heard things, but there was nothing substantial evidentiary-wise that could fucking bury Difronzo. But I've always seen the FBI, they don't care if it's a small case. If they can name a guy in a murder and then base that on the testimony of a fucking rat, they always go with it. Why did they not do that in this case? I don't get it. So, I have a question for all of you. You have heard the John Difronzo life story here a little bit, and you have heard about this case. So, my question to you, and I want you guys to go on Facebook, type in Mob Talk Radio, and I want you to message me, and I want you to tell me what your theory is. Is there any way possible that John Difronzo can get blamed for taking part in multiple murders? It's not just Anthony and Michael Spilatro, multiple murders, yet he's never indicted, but yet his co-conspirators who whacked the fucking Spilatro brothers with him get locked up and get convicted. How is it that John Difronzo doesn't even get indicted for that? How is that possible? And use your thought process of how the FBI fucking manages shit and how they act. Because if Sammy the Bull says, John Gotti fucking ordered that hit, Frankie Lucasio, this is a great example for you. Frankie Lucasio did not kill anybody, but he sat in a room where John Gotti said, I'm going to whack him. I want him dead. I'm going to kill that motherfucker. Take your pick. And Frankie Loke allegedly on tape says, listen, John, back it off. Don't do this. It's not worth it. Tries to save the guy's life. Doesn't matter. John reacts because he's pissed and he's angry because of bullshit lies that Sammy Gravano told him. Guy gets clipped. Now Frankie Lucasio is in a murder conspiracy, and he gets charged with all them murders. And so that's the thing. If Frankie Lucasio gets convicted of that because somebody else ordered it, did it, and Sammy Gravano testifies to the bullshit, how is it that John Difronzo in this certain position or in this certain case doesn't get indicted? It doesn't fucking make sense to me. So any of you that live out in Chicago who really covered the Family Secrets trial or know a lot about it, reach out to me because I'm curious as to what your opinion is on that. So to me, it's a little strange. I mean, maybe it's luck of the draw. I just have a hard time buying that because I've seen how the FBI does shit. And this screams to me payoffs, bribes. I don't fucking know. I'm not going to say the guy's a rat. I'm not going to say that. But I think it's a little weird because I think at the end of the day, if fucking Nick Calabrese is saying you whacked this guy and he participated in this murder with this guy, and that guy gets pinched and goes to prison for the rest of his life, and you don't even get charged. Because think about it, if you have a basis of information, Nick Calabrese has a basis of information, right? And he says, X, Y, and Z killed X, Y, and Z with X, Y, and Z. Well, that guy gets arrested, so there's enough evidence to suggest, at least based on the conviction of the testimony of Nick Calabrese, that gets other guys pinched for this murder, Marcelo, but it doesn't get fucking Difronzo pinched. That's why I'm confused. That's why I'm starting to lean a kind of way about this. Because if the information and the testimony was good enough for 3 other people in this particular murder conspiracy, why wasn't it good enough for the 4th? You had enough to convict 3, why not 4? So, go on Mob Talk Radio, inbox me, and tell me what you think. Because it's a little strange to me. All right, so all that being said, we are going to be back next week with an all-new show, more Q&A, another topic of the biography, and etc. What you can do in the meantime. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, Mob Talk Radio. You can check us out on Facebook, Mob Talk Radio. Give a like, give a subscribe, send your hate mail, because you guys always do that too. And we will be back next week with an all-new show.